And welcome back to Mixed Media. We are live for another week of awesomeness. And this time we've actually got 5 people on the stream. You can't see one of them right now. I should probably write that on the side. I'll do that in a moment. But we have an awesome guest today, and we'll let them introduce themselves in a second. But first, our show is a weekly live show happening every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And you can check out all the links to where you can find our show at mixedmediapodcast.com. So, yep, link is that way on the screen. You can go ahead and check that out. And what we do is we talk about pretty much anything art-related, whether it's about movies, gaming, music, anything in between, anything about any of those things, history, philosophy, pop culture, news, whatever you can think of. Please check out our vast catalog of episodes. It's ridiculous how much we've covered in the past... how long have we been going? Like a year? 2 years? Almost 2 years. Maybe.
Sounds about right.
Okay.
More than 2 years, right?
Actually, no. I was in my sophomore dorm when we started. I remember this. So I don't know if that's when we started, but at least I remember doing the episodes in my sophomore dorm. So
We started in like April of 2021, I think.
Okay. So it's been a while. So we've got literally hundreds of segments for you to go check out. So definitely go check out our vast catalog. So let's introduce ourselves. So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. I own a company called Ariella, and you can check out the website at ariella.co.
Hi, my name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
And I'm Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
And we have 2 guests, if they can introduce themselves. Whoever wants to go first. Oh. Wait, are you guys hearing things and I'm not hearing things?
Yeah, you don't hear him?
No.
Yeah, I can hear him.
Oh, I muted you. My bad. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is 909 Crime. I'm a video game developer, music composer.
Sweet.
And I am Kai Kairos, whatever exactly. And I actually am by day a customer success specialist. But when I'm not at work, I really like to make way too many silly video games. And I would call myself pretty much a generalist in that regard at this point.
Sweet. All right, so 99 Crimes on audio, just so we know. And they are also awesome supporters of us on mixedmedia.locals.com alongside Rob Sharma, Post, and I'm missing one person.
Alex Egbert.
Alex Egbert, okay, there we go. And you can join them at mixedmediapodcast.com. There's a link to it there. If you're on Rumble, there's a big salmon button. If you click that, it brings you right there. And you get access to this beautiful live whiteboard right here that seldom anyone takes advantage of. Guys. And you can draw and do whatever you want during the stream within reason, although within reason is a pretty broad spectrum. You can make fun of us if you want on the whiteboard. That's totally fine. So yeah, I think that's all the housekeeping I've got. So how have you guys' weeks been?
It's been alright. I wasn't here last week actually because I went to a concert. So that was actually the first non-school concert I've ever gone to, I think. So yeah, it was for a band called King's Kaleidoscope. I don't know how to describe their music at all. It's something. They got a lot of instruments.
Okay, wait, no. We could figure out some way. Like, are there instruments? Is it?
There are instruments.
Okay.
There are vocals.
There are more than one person. It's a band.
Okay, yeah, it's a band.
Okay, we've got somewhere.
What?
Is it jazzier? Is it poppier? Is it
It's so I think actually Wikipedia lists them as like rock or something like that, which is like it's so strange to me. It's like I guess.
Yeah.
King's Kaleidoscope. Yeah. Okay, there you go. King's Kaleidoscope. You go to Wikipedia, and it says their genres are alternative rock. I guess I don't know. Okay. Chamber pop. I don't know what that is. Indie rock and Christian pop. So, they're your your descriptors. I don't know. You kind of have to listen to it to get it, I suppose. But they got a lot of instruments. They got a trombone, a trumpet. They got like 2 drums, a violin, a bass, as in, like both bass guitar and like the other bass, and 2 electric guitars, I think, and a keyboard and a vocalist. So they have quite a lot going on, and I know there are not enough members to play them all at the same time. So they just sort of on the fly switch what they're playing, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, and there was an opening act. I can't remember their name, unfortunately. They were good too. But Kings of Kaleidoscope is it's pretty great. And yeah, so that was my week.
Cool. How about you, Ben?
I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's anything interesting that happened this past week. I can't think of anything in particular. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say my week was pretty boring as well. I don't think anything really of interest happened. Just straight work as normal. I watched 12 Angry Men for the first time, and it is one of my favorite films. Now,
Really?
yeah. Wait. Do you have a contrary opinion?
Have you read the story?
No, I have not.
Okay. All right. Fair.
Okay, the story's much better, is what I'm getting.
I watched and read it when I was like 12 years old, so I found the story to be really compelling, but I found the movie to be personally excruciatingly boring.
Oh wow. Okay.
but I saw it literally 10 years ago, so
Okay.
so it's
fair.
like who knows what it would be now.
Yeah. I actually found the exact opposite. I was like riveted from opening frame. So yeah, but that's fair. But it's my first Sidney Lumet film, so that was interesting. And it's like so fascinating from a lot. I'll probably do an episode on it one day. Not right now. How about Kai or 909? What's been going on? Kai,
Wants
let's
to
start
take
with
the
Kai.
bite.
Let's see. I went to a wedding, and that was interesting because I either had not learned or had forgotten that it was going to be a traditional Latin Mass, which is an older form of the Mass. And in this case, it wasn't like a high Mass, which means that there was a lot of silence, like more than I'm used to. So that was a bit of an adjustment. Then there was a reception, and that was really nice. Kind of the first time I've been invited to a wedding that was just like from my church, and not like because I knew the people all that well. Like I felt like it was more like I knew them okay, but like it was a different vibe for that reason. Then I had a birthday party in another city, and I got to drive. And work's been pretty busy, but they were very awesome and gave me half the day off so I could kind of do this pretty comfortably. Because it's time of year normally I'd be staying about half an hour into your podcast, just kind of to make sure I have time to catch up on the emails. But not today.
Sweet. By the way, I don't know if you mind saying, but what state are you in?
I am in Oregon. So I live in like the Willamette Valley area. If anybody knows where Portland and Salem are, I live in Portland. That's where the wedding was. The reception was about half an hour away from that, and the birthday party I went to Sunday was like an hour south of where I live now. So that was no driving, which was unfortunate, but it could have been worse.
Yeah. How about you, 909?
My week has been all right. A little bit slower. It is actually this week is oddly kind of slow. Like last week was kind of a lot, and I know next week is gonna probably be a bit more. But but I know it's picking up because I have a midterm on Thursday. I have a thing in Harlem on Friday, and I have a work meeting on Saturday, and then I have like stuff due throughout this week. So it's after today, it's gonna be hectic. But but before this, it's been pretty chill.
Okay, this will be the extension of your chill, hopefully.
Yes, yes, it will.
Sweet, sweet. How about news? Anything interesting in the news world? We've got 3 gaming people on here, so the news segment on gaming must be fire.
I actually don't have that much time. Some minor stuff, I guess, is that Squadron 42, which is essentially originally was part of what's it called, Star Citizen, like part of the original Kickstarter campaign, and then they said, "Oh, it's kind of a large project. Let's make a spin-off sort of thing." It's still part of Star Citizen, but it's like a sort of separate module called Squadron 42. They finally finished that a decade after the Kickstarter started, so they consider it feature complete. So that is one small step towards endless steps. Is what I'm understanding. So there's that, and aside from that. Apparently, Twitch now has simulcasting, they say. This article does not make it very clear. I'm kind of confused, to be quite honest. But it seems like you are able to stream on other platforms from Twitch, now? I'm not entirely sure. So I mentioned that more because I was curious if that would affect the stream in some capacity. I doubt it will, considering Twitch is not incredibly relevant for the stream. But, yeah, that's something.
Yeah, I literally had the thought earlier today. I was like, while I was setting up the live stream, I was like, why doesn't one of these live platforms just take Restream's lunch and, like, become the Restreamer themselves, and they can give themselves advantages like, no latency compared to the outgoing streams. But I guess Twitch has figured that out, so.
There you go.
Yeah. Sweet. I'll go next. So... The only thing that I've noticed is some economic stuff with related to entertainment industry, mostly that bad. I follow a cinematographer who works in LA, and he actually sold his Red Komodo. If you don't know, Red cameras are quite expensive, but a Red Komodo is not. It's not nearly as expensive, but still pretty expensive. And he ended up selling it to get a mirrorless type setup. That's just how bad things were going for him. And he wasn't getting work that needed that kind of professional level equipment. And he was talking about a lot of the felt industry in LA being quite bad in terms of there being work. So I thought that was fascinating. But then on the industrial side, on the corporation side, we've got YouTube locking down ads finally. So YouTube is trying to get those pesky ad blocks away, which I find fascinating because it's a symptom, almost certainly, of them just becoming profitable, then ad revenue dying because of the economic downturns. Ads are typically one of the first budget items cut by other companies. So if you're Pepsi and you're struggling to sell more Pepsi because the consumer doesn't have as much money, you're going to cut your ad spend first before you cut like R&D or something like that, So ads tend to suffer first in economic downturn. So likely that's happening to them, and they're like, well, we just became profitable and we don't want to lose that status. So we're going to finally, after however many, like over a decade of not caring, being a zombie company and not caring, we're going to finally enforce our ads, force you to see the ads. So there you go. That's all I've got.
I did get a message saying you have ad blocker, turn it off or whatever to ease YouTube. But you can just close the message and keep playing it. Like, it doesn't, do anything. At least for me. I don't know if it's, like rolling it out or something slowly, but for me, I just close the window and then it just keeps playing. And now I think my ad blocker might block the ad blocker because what happens is I don't see the message anymore, but the video freezes. I just play it. Like, it freezes like 5 seconds in, and I click play again. It just pauses automatically. So I don't know. It's very interesting. But
I believe there is a famous Supreme Court case about ad blockers, and I can't remember exactly the fine details. I remember finding it fascinating, like however long ago when I read about it, but like, if I remember correctly, there was an adjudicated right to alter what you receive, which kind of makes sense just loosely conceptually, but I don't remember entirely. So it's like you're receiving the HTML and all the accompanying stuff. Can you edit it as you wish? And the answer was basically yes, I think.
Gotcha.
So it's interesting.
I wonder how that would be related to like video game cheating. You know, like if, for example, like with a wall hack or something like that, where you're just modifying the visuals to show like some outlines based on some positions that you shouldn't actually be seeing or something. It's like,
I think that would be different because you're interacting. So if I were to imagine what a lawyer would argue, and probably what would be accepted, is that it's different because it's like an activity, whereas one is like a static. You're statically receiving something, you know. The other one's like an activity. So you're altering the activity versus altering a final product that you receive, if that makes sense.
okay.
Yeah, that's what I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else with news?
Irving, yeah, you haven't mentioned the latest on Alec Baldwin.
What's the latest?
I think
I missed it.
I guess the prosecutors are trying to charge him again.
Oh, okay. I think I mentioned that. Maybe I forgot to mention it. I might have.
I don't think so.
Oh yes, they can't decide whether they can't decide whether or not they want to charge him or not. And I'm wondering when statute of limitations is just gonna destroy any possibility of having any meaningful trial. But yeah, no, I did hear about that. I think it's just every time there's like a DA change, prosecutor change, there's like different politics at play. I'm sure on a local level it makes sense to local people or something. Everyone's just trying to make a name off of the off of the Alec Baldwin case is what it feels like. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's actually a big plot twist that I forgot to reveal on our Discord, and that's an incentive to go to mixedmediapodcast.com, check out the Discord, because I'll post it there, a screenshot of an email I received that is quite interesting. I might have a close encounter with Alec Baldwin quite soon. So, stay tuned.
What? Okay.
Big life plot twist. Any other gaming news from our other two gaming people?
I have a bit of news. I kind of just learned about this, and I don't know too much about it, but it looks like the U.S. government is gonna restrict the sale of the RTX 4090 to China.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
How do they have as in it was what part of the government is doing that?
I'm just gonna post a link.
Okay.
I'll post a link in the Skype chat.
Gotcha.
I watched a video about it earlier today, and I was just reading on it online.
Why the 4090 specifically, not the whole 4000 series or something?
The 4090 is the new is like coming. Did it come out? It's coming out.
Oh,
soon.
I have no idea.
I think
the 4080 Super is coming out soon. I don't know if the 4090 is a thing or not. It could be a thing for all I know.
I don't know. I just know that this is probably like the lowest end GPU that they're blocking. They blocked a few other ones, but the 4090 was like the last one on the list. That's like
U.S. Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security. Interesting. NVIDIA will need to halt its shipments to China following a recent decision. That's the tag. That's the subtitle, at least. What do we call it? Interesting. Huh. I'm curious. I didn't know that was a thing that you could just like. How did this happen? Like, is there like a vote or like how does this work? You know what I'm saying?
No. Imports and exports are exclusive executive branch control. Pretty much, they can be curtailed by Congress, but otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. I wonder if this will mean that it's not like they won't get them, but like could you do a thing where like you ship it to another country that ships it to China?
Probably.
So that's probably what's going to happen. More expensive, essentially. Not necessarily that they won't have it, just more expensive.
Yeah. But NVIDIA is probably very unhappy about it, I'm sure.
Yes. I probably.
Yeah. Sweet.
All right. You got anything, Kai, for gaming news?
No, I saw a video that I will post in the chat if anybody's curious. So a lot of devs, I've just seen a trend for maybe obvious reasons of a lot of devs trying Godot for the first time. A lot of the Unity people trying Godot for the first time are finding it to be like if it's hyped up as being Unity but with open source licensing, that seems to be not correct. And it's interesting to me that I found sort of I don't know. I feel like sometimes people are trying too hard to just give you like kind of the straight answer, and not necessarily giving you like a nuanced answer. And I feel like there's more nuanced answers than the ones you might get from some people. But I've also never used Unity, so I don't really have the same place that they're coming from. But I saw one recently where a guy had literally tried Godot during Ludum Dare, which is like a 48-hour jam. And so I will grab the link on that one for people to watch once they're done with this wonderful podcast, if they want to. That was an interesting video because I thought it was a fairly balanced view. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he had to say about Godot, but I also don't use the animations the same way that he does. So I might not be the guy to really ask. But that's Adam Eunice, who's like a known quantity. Like if you're watching indie devs on YouTube, he's one that you probably at least know exists, even if you don't watch them regularly. So that's been interesting to see a lot of people trying Godot who weren't trying it before, even just for a lark or for content or whatever. But yeah, that's most of what I've seen. I don't really follow AAA news. I know that Mario Wonder made a big splash with a lot of people, and I've had friends who are having various reactions to it. It sounds like it's getting fairly well received, but it's a 2D Mario game. It's worst case scenario reception is going to be meh. So.
Right.
Cool.
That's interesting. I gotta check out this video because that's interesting to think. Like, it never occurred to me that people would people who switch from Unity to Godot or whatever. Like in my brain, Godot is pretty good, right? So I'm like, oh, that'll go well. But it's very possible that people, because they're not as similar. It's not a direct like equivalent. Like Godot isn't just Unity but free type thing, completely free. People might actually have some struggles with it, because it's just a whole different workflow, and there are certain things you just can't do really easily on Godot that you can in Unity. So yeah, Unity does kind of have a spot, have a certain like target market of people that Godot really won't resonate well with. So that's interesting to think about.
Sweet. Yeah, I just realized I had I actually have my own gaming news, which is City Skylines 2 came out, which I've been talking about on the Discord, and I'm an avid City Skylines player. Although my city died, and I literally cannot touch the game because the moment I like think about it, I get so upset. Like the amount of detailing that went into that city was so insane, and I never shared it with anyone. It was just a personal project. Maybe I should have. But City Skylines 2 came out, and it's got 25% positive on Steam right now.
Ooh, well, we did discuss on the Discord the performance, the bad performance.
Yeah, that's
right?
like the chief complaint by far is like it is not performant, and there are people. I have a 3080, and nothing to laugh at for most people. And I'm seeing a lot of comments with people with 3080s or 3080 Ti saying that they have to bring the game down to like, basically City Skylines 1 level graphics in order to make it playable. Which, I mean, obviously, the whole style of the game is different. I think the art is very nice. I think the actual, graphical technologies it's leveraging are not good. So it doesn't look like a game. It doesn't look like a next gen city builder, and that's kind of what they promised. So I've not been on the hype train for the game. I've kind of been disappointed this entire time, except for the traffic system, which I think is phenomenal. But besides that, I've kind of been skeptical, and I think the community's realizing kind of the stuff that I've been thinking about this whole time. So, yeah, not good. But I will be streaming the game at some point, probably, just for fun.
So you will buy it, or do you have it already?
Yes, so I think what I might do is what is it on Steam? You can return it within 48 hours? Is that what it is?
No, it's longer than that, right? What's the policy? Is it a week?
I believe it's 2 weeks, but you want to be mindful of this, because if you're giving it a try before you buy kind of thing, which I'm not 100% certain if that's the intent, but it is a 2 hour.
Oh.
So if you've played a game for longer than 2 hours, it's not returnable under normal circumstances. Because the refund policy, it can be, I want to say that it can be for if it's just not your thing. But the idea is that you should know that within a couple hours, which is, for most games, I think that's pretty reasonable, yeah.
I'm actually surprised they allow you to return it at all, to be honest. But, what I might do then, actually, that might be a fun stream, because I've been thinking just I feel like content creation in my life is just, it's always framed as work, and it's very annoying, because sometimes I just want to have fun. So I might just make an Irving Nestor random channel and just do stupid stuff, because I'm a really random person, and I feel like I want to share the random. So I might do that just for fun, and have no expectations on that channel whatsoever. If I don't post for a whole year, who cares? And I might do a 2 hour sort of try before you buy challenge, let's say. And maybe in the 2 hours of the stream, I'll decide whether or not I'm keeping it. That might be a little fun. But I don't know. I suspect I'll keep it just because I love city building so much, and City Skylines 1, I just can't open it again. I'm too traumatized. So this might be the only way. We'll see. Maybe it's just that bad.
What broke it in City Skylines 1? Was it update?
They had a flurry of DLC at the end, which typically their DLC releases are pretty well coordinated with the mod community, and you can sort of prepare your city for what's about to happen. But they had such a large, fast flurry of DLC that came out at the end of the life of CS1 that and the mods developers were just not prepared for it, and so it broke a lot of cities. So, and I don't think they cared because they know City Skylines 2 is coming out, so who cares if you trash a bunch of people's cities? Yeah.
Gotcha. So even if you went back to prior version, would it still be broken?
Yeah, because the mods themselves have updated. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Or at least some of them. That's kind of the problem.
Oh, I guess speaking of CS1, something that's actually, I guess, somewhat of a news thing I haven't really been mentioning is CS2, not City Skylines 2, but Counter-Strike 2, is number 1 in Steam charts. So,
dang.
Mm.
Sweet. All right.
Also, it seems like we're having whiteboard permission shenanigans, by the way.
What's going on?
Well, for anybody who hasn't drawn it before, right, they need their own layer.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, but if you want to transition to the next segment, and then while we're doing the whole interview or something, you can sort that out.
Okay, I'll do that. Sweet. All right, so that was our new segment. So now we're going to go into gaming. And for gaming, again, we have a beautiful, wonderful interview lined up with our favorites, if we can say that. And so after that, we'll be arguing with Reddit, and after that, Ben will talk about Tchaikovsky. So it'll be a fun time. So here we go.
Mixed Media Gaming.
All right, welcome to Mixed Media Gaming. This is a particularly special gaming episode since I haven't done an interview in a very long time. So we're going back. We're going back a little bit. I gotta dust off the interviewing skills, which don't really exist. So we're gonna try though. We're gonna try. So yeah, today we'll be interviewing Kairos and 99 Crime, two of our local supporters who are also game developers. So yeah, I suppose before we start, we should reintroduce ourselves for anybody who's just catching the podcast live or who's watching this in post. So my name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and game developer.
And my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. I own a company called Ariella.
Hi, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
And we have our two guests. So, I guess since I'm interviewing guys, you guys should give a more thorough, introduction. Maybe how you got into game development, where you guys are at with that right now, and yeah. So let's start off with 99 Crime. What's your situation?
Sure. I'm 99 Crime. I'm a computer science major. I'm about to graduate from Rutgers University. And I am a video game programmer and music composer. I currently work at Half and Half Studios doing the music for various projects there. As well as I do a lot of my own games. I do game jams with Kairos, and as well as other projects. I've been doing game stuff on and off since I was like a kid. But I'm just, as I'm finishing up college, I'm starting to take it a lot more seriously. I'm doing different programs, game dev programs and stuff. So I'm really trying to get into the industry.
Sweet.
That's cool. All right. How about you, Kairos?
So I kept my teeth on early game creation systems. So if anybody remembers a game called ZT from back in the very early 90s, that was the first game that Tim Sweeney made. So if you hate Fortnite, you can blame ZT. But you should also thank ZT because it's given rise to a lot of people's sort of game design aspirations, and is a really nice, accessible, but not limited in a bad way sort of tool. And the thing that was revolutionary was that shareware, which was that crazy idea but bananas is what he called it, what Jeff Vogel called it, idea of just like giving out like large portions of a game or like practically whole games for free and then just like selling the sequels. ZZC did that, but it also included like an editor, so you could basically make your own games with it. So that was like my first big that's why I learned to type. I learned to type from making ZZC games and like their little scripting language. That's a lot of it. And then Megazeus in the mid 90s, which was a similar dynamic, but then later became open source. And then more recently, and so I've been using those sort of off and on for a long time. And then recently kind of came back, got into Game Maker Studio 2, did some more ZZT work. I still do some Megazeus work on occasion, and getting into Godot more recently. And then actually 909 took me back one step further to a system that I had actually used before, which was the first Game Maker Studio I've never actually used for like a actual project. I kind of just dinked around with them a little bit, and then eventually used GMS 2. So I got to experience GMS 1 in more depth when we made Necrocities. But we'll talk about that later, I'm sure.
Yeah. So we'll be talking about two of the games that they made in the game jam, specifically talking about Necrocities, as was just mentioned. I'll be talking about Totems of Yonder, both submissions for Metroidvania month. So either you guys want to explain what Metroidvania month is? I suppose the title, the name is a little bit, it kind of explains the whole concept of it. But if you guys want to explain how you got into Metroidvania month and how you feel about it. Whoever wants to.
Short answer for me is due to the pandemic, I started doing Metroidvania month. That's kind of part of it. And then I came back and kind of have worked on a team with between 1 and 3 other people every jam for the last Totems. Necrocity was my 6th in a row, and Totems was number 5. So yeah, it's been it's been about almost 2 years that I've been doing just it's a quarterly jam, so I've been doing it once a quarter for that couple of times.
That's pretty often.
Yes, it is. Anyway, I'll stop talking now and let 909 answer for himself as far as.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of Metroidvania Month, but I kind of joined it because K. Kairos invited me to. That's my main reason.
Gotcha. And I'm remembering now that you have to leave a little bit early, so you're leaving at 8:25, and it's a little bit. It's 8:10.
Oh, I thought it was 8:45. Oh man, I would have rushed the intro more.
No,
Sorry
yeah, I straight up just like did not realize what time it was until I just looked. So, is there any so do you words wow, okay. Would you rather us talk about Totems or Necrocities first? Do you have any preference, 909, since you leaving earlier?
I mean, so my role was a bit bigger on Necrocities, or bigger. I mean, it was a different role that I was a bit more involved, and I like grew a lot more from, I should say, just because there was a lot of turbulence in that development cycle. So that I can give more thorough answers to for sure. If you want to talk about that one first.
All right, let's talk about that first. Yeah, sure. So, what were those roles? What did you end up doing on the project?
So, I was the so my main role was the programmer. So that's why we use Game Maker Studio 1, which actually is kind of a funny story because we were originally going to use Game Maker Studio 2 because we both have it, but I have way more experience with Game Maker Studio 1 and the older versions. But I was hoping to use this as like a learning experience. And what I usually do is I usually make something in Game Maker Studio 1 and then port it over to 2. So I made a demo with a whole bunch of physics and like the move set for the character and stuff like that in 1. And then I spent like a good week trying to get it going in 2, and like I could not get a good workflow going. Like it just wasn't sticking. So I'm like, okay, we have a month to do this, and I just wasted a week, and I have nothing to show for it. So in order to make up for that, because what I was really focused on is the programming, the gameplay testing, and like the game flow stuff. And me and K. Kairos kind of like ideated over the whole game's concept, and he did you did the music and the art, of course. And so what were you saying? But yeah, so what we did actually is I ended up making a tool. I made a level editor that would allow K. Kairos to make levels while I continued to program the other parts of the game. And so I spent like 2 or 3 days making that level editor, and what it did was it's a part of the game. So it's a part of the compiled video game that you press a button from the title screen, you go into this level editor, you can make levels, and then after that, the reason why we did that is because he didn't have Game Maker Studio 1 for a while. So I only had Game Maker Studio 1. He didn't have it. And I'm like, okay, if he can't work in my engine, then there's a disconnect. So I had to make a level editor to kind of bridge that gap. You understand? So I actually didn't know how to do that, and I had to kind of force myself to
This is the most impressive thing I've heard going on in a month.
So, yeah, I spent like 2 or 3 days making a level editor, and and what the process was is it's like a level where you set blocks down, and those blocks would represent like the environment. Then you press a button, it exports it into a text file with like a list of all the objects, but that list isn't optimized, so I had to make a Python script that optimized the list, and then converted that to XML, and then I take the XML code and I re-inject it back into the Game Maker Studio project file. And that was how we would do levels for like 3 days, until after that, Yo-Yo Games gave K. Kairos Game Maker Studio 1, and I revamped the physics system. So it was we didn't really use it that much.
Well, let's go Yo-Yo Games. Let's go.
Right, finally. Right? I'm gonna be real. I was kind of mad at them because like they wouldn't. We were bottlenecked. Remember, weren't we?
Yeah. So the thing is that if you have GMS1, there's no like obvious place to download the like registered version, as it were, in your new thing. And like the way that I had it was from like a Humble Bundle from like 2018 or something. So I had to email their request. So I emailed their request, and they were, to be clear, they were pretty awesome once I actually was like, okay, I need to do this. This is partly on me that I didn't do this probably almost immediately. was I emailed their customer support and I said, this is going to sound like a weird question, but I have access to this because of this bundle from like several years ago. Do I still have access to this? Is that okay? They were like, yeah, but we'd encourage you to use number 2, but here's a registration code that'll get you in. And I was like, okay, sweet. But like, and it was like, I don't know if they really understood that we had, and I thought I'd said this, that we'd already like gone and tried to, but it didn't work. So like for us, so we were going to have to use the first one because they would have preferred to use 2, but like I'm not the primary coder in this project, so that's not I'm not the one who has to deal with that. There were other things that we did have to deal with, but that story I'll let Niner tell those stories.
Yeah, but so that was the Game Maker Studio fiasco, and I mean I'm happy that they finally clicked in, because I tell you, I was vlogging about this and I was kind of ranting on YouTube about it. I was so mad because like they were like stopping on I was trying to stop in the progress because I didn't know too, and I was trying to force myself to learn it and I couldn't, and it was anyway. So yeah, we made that. That was going well, and the physics revamp actually was a whole nother improvement, because before then I was using the built-in Game Maker Studio collision system, and a problem with that was that it was if you don't use it right, you can kind of clip into objects, and that wasn't very cool. So, and I'm like, all right, I need to figure that out. So I figured out how to fix it, and it made the game run so much better. And it also made it so that the way the collision works is we have like a generic collision object that you hit, instead of having each object be associated with a tile, so that you can make levels separately in like another program and then just put the collision objects in it on top of the level, so you can like hit stuff and they would be invisible to the actual player, but to the game they would be there, and then you could see them in the editor. So that was kind of cool, and it made things a lot easier, and it actually probably made the game run better because there's less objects on screen too.
Okay, now I have to ask, if we're gonna talk about running better, why is it that the web build runs 2 times faster than the standalone build? And for some context for people who haven't played the game yet, I don't mean like we're talking 2 times the FPS, although maybe that might be true as well. I don't actually know.
I think it is true.
But okay.
I think it is true.
Because I think I have an idea of what's going on. But what happens is like the character moves 2 times faster, everything goes literally 2 times faster. So is it that everything's sort of based on some sort of based on the frame rate essentially, and the frame rate is just better on the web build or something?
Okay, so yeah, first of all, the game is locked to the frame rate, so it's supposed to run at lock 30 frames per second. However, on the PC build, we exported it to 30 FPS, and I think when we did the web build, right, because Kairos like exported the web version, well, you exported it at 30, right, and then it just.
I think I like tried to find an option and I couldn't. I don't remember exactly what happened. I think I couldn't find an option, and like it was already like, so you get a day of Metroidvania a month that you can like you can be late, and I think we were already in the late day when we were exporting web builds.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think we had like 3 hours to go in the late period before we finally got everything uploaded.
Yes, that is very true.
So that's my excuse in the event that it was my fault. If not, then I blame Game Maker Studio for locking all the web builds to 60 FPS, because why would they do that? But I feel like it's very probable there was a setting somewhere that I just didn't click that would have actually made it correct. I just don't know. But yeah, the long and short is the web build is at 60.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did end up winning. I ended up beating the game. Okay, so I ended up beating it at 2 times the difficulty, roughly. So I actually didn't think that was. I thought it was just hard. Okay, and I didn't realize that was not intended until you messaged me that. So, and I just realized that I haven't really explained what the game actually is. So maybe provide some good visual context. So it's a 2D platformer, and it has some sort of the hook for me was the I guess narrative of it. So you kind of start you it's a platform, right? So you walk off to the right side edge of the screen and you enter a new stage, and it has like some text, and the text is like, do you remember the exact words? It was, or just like the general idea, because I remember it was a message, and it had a send date that was like in the 1990s, I want to say. Do you remember what that message was?
I don't know, but do you want me to explain that environment?
I would like to guess. Actually what the whole narrative sort of means, but I'll continue to explain the game. So, actually, why don't you guys explain the game, because you guys made it.
Okay, so quickly, the game is supposed to be So I'm going to give you the basic concept. I'm not going to tell you what the rooms mean, but I'm going to give you the basic concept. So the basic concept is that it's like a cyberpunk thing where you're sucked into a video game. Not a video game. You're sucked into a web ring of websites from like the 1990s and the early 2000s. So you're playing, and these levels are themed after the different type of websites you might encounter on GeoCities or on NeoCities, like back in the day.
That's pretty cool.
The name NecroCities. I noticed that. I was like, oh, I get it now. It clicked. I was like, I get it.
Yeah, I got to play for a little bit, not as long as I would have wanted, but I had 20 minutes earlier. I got to play it for a bit, and I was like, this feels early internet. So there you go. You achieved the goal.
Success.
Yeah, no, I actually didn't get the different rooms themes. But the sort of thing that I guess that in terms of the narrative is that, based on the name and NeoCities, NecroCities, it is at least somewhat about sort of the dead internet, the old dead internet, and seeing messages. You have messages from the 90s, and you have a message that says something about referencing not having been on for a while. I think that message was from the 2000s or something like that. And so that idea, and I mentioned this to you before actually, that I could be wrong here. So here's a guess, and let me know that essentially the whole reason why there's a lot of Roman themed stuff, specifically in I guess like the middle to late area of the game, is sort of they at least relate in the idea that you can compare the old internet to a sort of great but dead civilization, right? Where it's like they left a lot of impact. It was quite a large scale event, but it doesn't exist anymore, type thing. I could be entirely wrong there, so let me know.
Well, now the real meaning feels shallow.
Oh. Seems that I made up some stuff in my head, I guess.
It's not too far off, honestly.
So the real meaning was that it was taking the idea of internet forum in a very literal direction.
Oh.
So like the internet forum, but like the Aeropagus.
Okay, I see. I see. Well,
hold on. So we've got a few chats here. We've got LBC says Necrocities is an inadvertent frustration platformer, and also says, real question, why that arrow got such shifty eyes though? there's an arrow enemy if you haven't played the game.
Mm-hmm. Now, did LBC play on the hard mode or not? Because that will determine. Was LBC playing on the web build or the standalone build? That's going to be determining how hard the game was. So, yeah, one thing that I know you don't have much time here, so we're gonna speed run this. Some questions here, but I know that it wasn't a very linear thing in that you could kind of go anywhere. Not literally anywhere, but once you got all the power-ups, you did have some freedom of where you chose to go, right? Not that everywhere you could go was meaningful to you at the moment, right? It could, it wasn't necessarily that useful. But how did you sort of manage creating a sort of? It wasn't very linear, you kind of went back on yourself and stuff like that, and that was interesting. So how did you? I don't know which one of you did the level designing, but how did that work?
Shoot. So we kind of collabed on the level designing. I kind of spent a lot of time refining them just to make sure that it wasn't too difficult. It wasn't too rage inducing. But yeah. So we had we had a few calls where we wrote stuff out. We had whiteboard sessions where we would talk about the size of the game, and the game was actually supposed to be way bigger than this. It was actually supposed to be way more stuff and more screens and more transitional spaces, shall I say, between the different power ups and stuff. But we kind of ran out of time, and we had to kind of scope it down. We were supposed to be, I think, 9 rooms, but I think right now there's like 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5 or 6, not including the hub, I think. And yeah, that was supposed to be what it was. Yeah, like one of the innovations earlier on. I could stay for 2 more minutes. I'll give you 2 more minutes. One of the innovations earlier on was figuring out how to do room switching, because I straight up didn't know how to do that in Game Maker. I had done tests in the past, but every time I came up with a method for doing it, it was like, oh, this is making the game slower, or this is too slow on a certain platform, or it's just kind of weird to program. And I was trying to think about like a nice programmatic way, and the method I settled on was just keeping the player character persistent between areas. Like that's like a setting you could hit in Game Maker, and just changing the X and Y location, and then changing the room after that. And it was that simple. Like, okay, this works.
I see.
And also before I forget, this is aside. Before I forget, this game has 75 browser plays and 6 downloads. So not many people played the downloadable version, even though we specified in the description the downloadable version is the best one. I mean, that's fair. The game is right there. You could play it in the browser, but it's like, it was interesting to see, because I mean, we had it was like a while. Like the voting period was like, how long was that, K Kairos?
Voting for MVM normally lasts for about 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was a 2-week voting period. So it's like, you could have downloaded it to check it out. Possible. But I mean people prefer web builds if they're there. People will play the web version. That is like a big fact.
I seem to have been one of those people who just did not realize that that there was a warning to not play the web build. But yeah, I don't know if we have time for another question, but I have to ask this before you head out. What is a hot gaming take or a general art take that you have before you leave?
Oh man, a hot gaming take. I think games need to be smaller.
Let's go. Okay.
Games absolutely need to be smaller. Like, it's so annoying when like you have a game that's about to come out and it's like 100 gigabytes, and it's like, like no way the game is 100. Like, come on now, get real. There's games that came out 20 years ago that are just as big, have just as much content, can be just as entertaining, and are like 1 gigabyte. You understand? Like, yeah. I don't know. I feel like catering to these people that like pay $10,000 for a computer exclusively is toxic. That's my take.
That's that Cities Skylines 2 mentality.
Take that, Paradox.
But yeah, I mean, I'll dip. If you have any like real specific question, you could ask me on Discord and I'll like respond quick. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on the podcast for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, he is gone. All right, well, it's just me and you, Kai. All right, so I still have some thoughts about Necrocities. So you did the music, right? You did the music.
Yeah, I did the music and a lot of the graphics. A lot of the world design credit really does go to 909. He did a lot of the specifics, and I did a lot of the tiles, and a lot of the sprites, and I did a couple of the backgrounds. But a lot of the world design credit, like that blog page that he did, that's just brilliantly 90s. That was basically 100% 909 crime. I think I went through it with like some tiles later. By the way, never try to auto tile. Never try to tile things in Game Maker Studio 1. It's just it's like I've been spoiled by Godot. I can't even do GMS2 as much. Like the auto tile is there, but it's so sorry. I won't harp on that too much longer.
I gotcha. I know that Godot had some. Do you use Godot 3 or Godot 4? I use Godot 3,
and 3.5, 3.6. So 3.5, 3.4, 3.5 was the last couple MVMs, I think, and then 3.6 is going to be Totems 2.0. But generally, I use just Godot 3.5, not 4.
Cause I feel like I can't remember what the changes were, but I believe there were some tiling updates in Godot 4.
There's some super awesome looking stuff as far as tile set, and I think there might be some potential for using 4 in another jam in the future, in like a Metroidvania month, maybe the next one. Not sure, but it also depends on a few things, because I'll get into this later, but I have gotten together sort of a small team for the Metroidvania month already. And 909 is on that team. So if 909 has the hardware for Godot 4, then that would be 1 point in its favor. If he doesn't, that's obviously a point against it. Because one thing I'd like to do is I'd like to have him involved in the project. And you can't really do that if the person can't run the program, basically. But also like there's at least one person in the Metroidvania month Discord who's like a known quantity who doesn't run the only graphical options that you have for exporting in Godot 4, like exclude categorically people who don't have like people are like more than like a generation behind on the computer. Basically, I think they basically can't run Godot 4 games because it doesn't have the option. That's my understanding. I could be misunderstanding something there. It might be fewer people than I think, but the ability to use the older OpenGL is important to me, at least right now.
Right. They have some option, like it's not the names are weird now. It's not something that's obvious, but they have an option that I think is sort of like in beta or essentially not quite stable, but I think they have an option for essentially supporting older equipment, but it's like, it's not like a fully supported thing yet. I'm not sure how far along it is, if it's like something that's worth checking out or not, but I believe that does exist in some capacity at least. So hopefully one day, if it's not already, it'll be a fully supported thing.
I've heard good things about tile maps, and I like the tile maps in 3. I'd like to have them be more accessible, but no, I did the music and the art. That was the main thing that I did. And,
how do you go about what is your musical process? How do you go about making music?
So do you remember the track that plays? I think it's in the temple, or it's in the forum level.
Okay.
The one that's like da 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 da, right? That one. So I wrote that track first, and then I basically just kept writing like variants of that melody and variants of the other thing, and like you're kind of taking things from one track and making them into new tracks, which seems like it wouldn't necessarily be good, but turns out it worked out okay, because like I kind of varied the styles a little bit. Like there's one track that's like a 6/8, like kind of almost lo-fi song. That's the first one that you hear when you get into the game, the title theme, and basically they're all just variations of each other.
How'd you end up making that first melody, that first idea?
I don't actually remember exactly how it came out. It was just like, here's an interesting idea for something, and then I did a B section that like sounded kind of like it might be a decent like workability thing. I can't remember if actually I was thinking like a 12-bar blues kind of thing, but like not blues obviously, because it wasn't like, I don't think there's a single blues song that you would call that in the game. But basically just I took the first part, and then I made it, and then I varied it a little tiny bit, and then kind of went back to the A section, and then I put some pads under it. I think that was the order of operations, or at least kind of. And actually, there's like a whole FL Studio project, or Fruity Loops Studio project that's like basically like the first version that I tried to make, and it was not as good. But I seem to have hit on something with that melody line, and I was like, well, this is kind of weird, and I feel like it would be kind of hard to like adapt exactly the different styles. And that was when I kind of was just like, well, I'm just going to start varying it and see what happens. And I think it actually, honestly, it might be my best soundtrack work for any of the games that I've ever been involved in.
Yeah, I will say that, like, usually out of game jams, especially when there's not a specific dedicated composer, I don't expect good things from music. But with both Necrocities and Totems of Yonder, I was actually like, oh wow, I'm actually impressed with the music here. Like, I remember when I did a game jam, the last time I did music for a game jam, I had no time, and I was doing all this stuff too, so I wasn't just composing. And so, what I did was I had the simplest. It was just like I took an arpeggio, and it was just that for like 4 bars, and then you switch it. Or sorry, was it for 1 bar or 4? I think for 4 bars, and then you switch it the next 4 bars, and you have 16 bars, and you repeat it over and over again. It is the simplest, sort of ear candy thing that just gets boring after after a few seconds, quite honestly. But it's better than, I suppose, silence. Maybe I hope it's better than silence. But that's what I ended up doing, and because it was sort of a foolproof, I don't have to think about it type thing. So I was really impressed that, especially with the technological challenges you faced for the first part, and just with the whole scale of the game and stuff. Not that it was like a grand AAA experience, whatever, but for a month game jam, it is quite a bit. So it was impressive that you're also able to fit in actual music that isn't arpeggios repeated over and over again. So that's pretty cool. I had a question to ask, and then I forgot because I'll explain my whole music lore. Oh yes, it was. How long have you been? When did you start creating music, and how did you learn? Do you have any sort of formal education, or was it all just sort of learning on your own? Were you watching videos, or pure experimentation, or what's the situation with that?
I had piano lessons, and I have friends who also like making video gaming music, and most of my experience is from tracker style programs. So a lot of what's happened in the soundtrack for Necrocities is that I've taken something and sort of rendered it, or I've taken a beat that even wasn't made in FL Studio to begin with. It was actually made in a program called Buzz Tracker, and I've grabbed samples from Music Radar, which has a lot of free samples available. Actually, if I can find the link to that one, I will try to post it in the stream chat for people's benefit. Basically, the idea is you take that, and then you can kind of and a tracker is really nice for breakbeats, which is what I use a lot of. A lot of the things that I use in Necrocities are breakbeats, or are just something that is easily a sampled beat. There's a breakbeat, there's a bit of a rock beat in one of the tracks, but I mean a lot of it is breaks. It's drum and bass, old things like that. And then, taking it, running it through filters and other effects using Buzz Tracker, which is a program that I'm more familiar with, is a digital audio workstation of a different kind that just kind of sequences differently. So it's like a piano roll or whatnot. It's the music thing for programmers. You'll see an old Amiga Pro Tracker mod. If you look at Amiga Pro Tracker on YouTube, you'll see videos of the mods playing in the program or in a similar program that's been written for now. But if you look at 909's channel, for example, a lot of his stuff is written in a newer tracker called Renoise, which is a similar thing stylistically, but also it's a similar thing stylistically. And so I use a lot of that stuff. And then FL Studio is actually a relatively new thing for me in terms of using to use piano rolls and stuff like that. But I've been working on that kind of thing off and on, and kind of getting steadily from being kind of mostly bad at it to being kind of good at it some of the time, to being, if I really apply myself, something will happen that is at least listenable. And then with stuff like Necrocities being kind of the higher end of the spectrum, if that makes sense, of what I produce now.
Was there anything that you think sort of contributed to this being maybe your best work, or was it just sort of sort of random chance, eventually going to make just something great,
So
not necessarily think about the projects.
I did. So I kind of had a little warm up because I did the OST composing jam in which I will probably not stop trying to see if I can convince people, including Ben, to join at some point. That runs, and the idea of the OST jam is that you don't make a game. They give you a concept, you imagine the game, and then you write the soundtrack for it instead of making the game. So that was something that I did this summer. That was a little bit of a warm-up exercise almost. And I think it's similar in composition to that, in that like I was kind of trying to do variants on different things, and especially when I went back and redid some tracks later. Just the idea of like picking tracks and making variants on them into other tracks, which goes back to and a similar thing, although I did it kind of more cheaply, was a game called Fair Lady Warning that I made for Megazeus back in I think 2012, and that one was one where I ended up like kind of reused a lot of things. I did things a little differently, but Necrocities was kind of like the Fair Lady Warning ethos of like reuse melodies for sort of cheap musical unity and bass lines for cheap musical unity, except that I kind of took it to a different place by actually improvising and riffing more expressly on those melodies. And at one point, if you listen to like the song from the album called from the forum, which is called Sir, This is the Internet, and in the actual SoundCloud playlist, it feeds directly into one called 3 Spooky 5 Me, because I took a lot of these like sort of from Imager era memery in terms of my titles.
5 Me.
Yes. And 3 Spooky 5 Me is more or less a version of the theme that's in kind of just a different scarier sounding key. So like I feel like I sort of evolved in a lot of ways. And if you look at like that, and it might be that and like the variant in the drum and bass song that plays when I assume that plays when you're that I wrote for the boss theme. That like sort of like actually does like a variant, but basically I took the idea of like reusing the melody, but I took it to a different extreme and a more creative extreme of actually riffing and varying and kind of taking a slightly different tack with the themes than they had before. I also made an effort to like, I didn't want all the songs to be super long. Like, I didn't want them to be like 5-minute game soundtrack pieces. Like, I'm not saying there's no place for that, but I kind of wanted them to be shorter, like, about a minute loop or so for a lot of the tracks. So that may have also helped, because I think it keeps you from getting to someone could probably correct me, and this is probably the wrong terminology, but getting kind of too avant-garde, too off the rails, keep you from wandering too much to really be effective as a soundtrack piece, if that makes sense.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Okay, so sort of like it's sort of limiting your scope in a way, right? It's like, you only have so much time to play with. And now I got to ask, Ben, how do you feel about the OST jam?
OST Jam. OST Jam was pretty good. I didn't do very well in it. I was actually down near the bottom. I actually went back, and if I had written what I eventually reworked the OST into for that one, for the actual jam itself, I think I might have done better. But I didn't do that, and so I didn't. And it's neither here nor there necessarily. But I keep in mind, like, we're talking about a difference where, like, I essentially reworked tracks into where they weren't really almost the same thing anymore than they started as, and like there were like 2 or 3, there were like 2.5 to 3 new pieces that were added. So just about everything was different than it was before, but it almost still feels a little bit more like it was a short film soundtrack rather than a game soundtrack. And I don't know, I think as a game soundtrack it would probably be worse than Necrocities, even though there are places that I think it might shine a little brighter. At least if you're talking about like a 2D like platformer, like if someone had made like a 3D sort of noirish game, maybe the one that I made for that soundtrack would have been better. But But yeah, I don't know. Composing jam is good. I think that it's a good exercise if you want to like kind of get out and like do music as like a thing. Like if you're like, hey, if you see a game jam, you're like, I wish I could do that, but I really just want to write music. This is an opportunity because they have options. They have the crunch time jam, which is a shorter form, more like a weekend jam than like a week that the usual one is. And it just has an opportunity to just get out your shell and just kind of try your hand at writing a game soundtrack, see if that works, see if that's something you can do. But it has you want to be prepared to like give and take criticism just like anything else, and possibly even more so than with a game jam, because like I think a lot of times with a game jam, if you're on a team, everybody in the team is capable of bringing the team up and bringing the team down, and you kind of succeed or fail as a team. But if you're in an OST composing jam, like if you write a composition and people just don't like the composition, then like that's kind of all on you. And it's kind of a personal thing where like, yeah, you just kind of wrote that and like you chose the instruments and you did all this other stuff. So in that respect, it's more like doing a game jam, but doing it solo. And not everybody does the OST jam in groups, but I think the groups are a lot rarer for the composer jams than they are for the regular game jams.
Gotcha. Okay, it sounds like something. Maybe I should partake in that. Although I fear that I would not do well. But I suppose it's not about where you place, but it's also about learning experience and stuff like that too. So
yeah,
so that might be something interesting you could do.
The guy who I think is behind LBC in the chat, which is a reference to something else that I could explain at another time. But the guy who is under LBC in the chat pointed out that there's actually somebody in the OST Composing Jam whose goal is to both improve every single time, but also continually get last place. Apparently that's a goal somebody has that they're currently meeting.
Interesting.
I don't know why that would be their goal, but power to them if they can actually pull it off to improve and still get last place.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I think we should change gears here and let's talk a little bit about Totems of Yonder. That was another Metroidvania game, and actually, I checked my email right before we started this episode. I saw there was you have a what would you call it? Do you call it a blog? Is that what you call these things?
Yeah,
it was a blog per se, but
I would call it a blog. Yeah, Substack is a blog. That's for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I saw a new post about Totems of Yonder. Actually, I didn't read it yet because it's right before the podcast started. But yeah, I got some hype going on. But yeah, basically, what would you like to explain to us who haven't played it before? What is Totems of Yonder?
Totems of the Yonder. Oh, sorry, that's not Totems of the Yonder. I just posted a thing from 909's channel where he's using Renoise, just so if anybody wants to see what Renoise looks like. And then yeah, so Totems of the Yonder is a procedurally generated Metroidvania with sort of a light speedrunning aspect. And that light speedrunning aspect sort of got added in almost a little bit last minute because there was a certain amount of like, when you say you're making something that's procedurally generated, people are going to think, oh, like a roguelike. And it's like, well, yes, it's procedurally generated like a roguelike is. But that doesn't make it a roguelike, and it doesn't even make it like a roguelite, which is like a thing that like will adopt a lot of the same like sort of design constraints and the ideas of like, a permanent death of some kind, or at least a permanent failure of some kind, but it's not. I'm a bit of a purist, maybe a tad bit elitist or pedantic about this. I wouldn't call it a roguelike because not turn-based, and it's not an RPG. It's a platformer, and it's in real time. That's at least two reasons that I can't really consider it to be a roguelike. But it does have that sort of aspect of like making different levels for you and like designing a design thing. And to be clear, procedural generation is a different design problem. It's not the same. But yeah, it's a procedural generated miniature Metroidvania. There are about 1,000 maps that you can play in the game that I've made human accessible because I only let players use seeds from 0 to 999. I don't let the seed number go any higher than that in terms of the human readable number.
Yeah. And procedural generation and Metroidvania aren't things that you might consider would go well together. But what I found was playing it playing it. Whenever you hear procedural generation, and I mentioned some podcasts before, I'm always a little bit skeptical because now I'm like, okay, well, this isn't handcrafted, and this could be bad. And then I played it, and there's certain things that surprised me, such as the fact that like you can actually complete every level, which is kind of crazy to think about. At least as far as I've played, I haven't come across. I played a few times, so I hadn't come across any map where I actually could not complete it. And also, I don't know if this is intentional. I don't know if it just happened to come out this way, but the sort of progression as with Metroidvanias is kind of normal. Is you sort of get abilities that let you go further, explore further, pretty much. And I always kind of got them like in order, like as in like I kind of was always led to like the right spot. I have no idea if this was like just me randomly wandering upon the first pickup like first rather than walking around the entire rest of the map and then finding it later, or if this is something that you intentionally made happen. But I'd be curious, how did you design things so that like the algorithm that made it so that you could actually finish the game? And am I imagining things, or was it actually like structured in a way where it made sense in terms of the ordering of where things are and stuff? It
was definitely structured to make sense. I can tell you that for sure.
Okay, that is even more impressive because I don't know how you did that. But
yeah, so it was definitely structured to make sense, and basically, I don't know if anybody's done anything with the whiteboard, but I will definitely use it now if anybody can give me access, because I would love to be able to draw a map and just explain the generation process in brief. Because I can tell you what I did. I'm sorry to do that to you now. I know. But if you could, pretty please. Otherwise, I can explain it verbally, and hopefully it'll make sense.
Wait, what am I pulling up?
If I can get permission, whiteboard. Can you give permission to Kairos to edit the whiteboard or to claim a layer? Because I can't do it. Like, it keeps telling me I don't have permission to own layers.
Okay.
And I need admin permission. Thank you. Sorry.
Approved. There you go.
Okay. Let me... Oh, yay! That's fantastic. Okay. So, I'm gonna...
I'll erase...
Hopefully...
there you go.
Yeah.
Wait, well, 99 Crime's not on audio anymore, so it doesn't actually make sense to have that up, I guess.
Yeah, that actually... Okay. So I'll let you do that. Okay. So let me pull up my handy-dandy notepad where, in lieu of actually getting screenshots, which would have been helpful for this segment, I went through my code, and I was like, yeah, remind myself what my code is doing, because I didn't remember. Oh, now I remember what that means. Sorry. There's a point in this that I literally forgot what it meant at a certain point, and I had to I was like, I know that's important, but I don't remember why. But now I remember. Okay.
Nice.
So, there's a few things happening with totems. So the first thing you need to know is what a subroom is, because I'm going to talk about subrooms. So, here we go. Yeah, we're going to do this. Okay, and then we're going to do this, and good, and this. Okay. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is...
whoa.
Oh, got some old stuff.
Delete layer. Maybe I can just add a layer. Can I do that? Nope, I don't have permission to do that. Okay, so let's go ahead.
The whiteboard situation has not really been thoroughly tested. So
yeah,
now we're,
well, in fairness, I'm sorry. I put a lot of pressure on the whiteboard situation that I didn't necessarily plan.
No, we really should have this figured out because we offer this as a service. So it's better to
maybe I should
pick
a less complicated service. We'll see.
Okay, so basically here's a grid, right? And the way that the maze is going out is going to be like this. So there's going to be different nodes. There's 4 nodes per room, right?
Okay.
And the way that the maze... Sorry, I'm just watching someone erasing something over there. It's great.
Yeah, hi.
And the way that the maze goes is it can go like this, like this, like this, like this.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, whenever you're drawing lines and connecting them and they're straight, you have to be real careful. Just to, not accidentally... You know what? Nope. Okay.
I understand actually what you're saying. I just realized.
There's a maze there, and there's nothing problematic that is accidentally showing up in the maze, because that would be very bad.
Real quick,
Okay, yeah,
Sir Stone says, real times troubleshooting just makes it more fun for the audience. Embrace it. Yeah, we've been doing this for too long to worry about incidental issues.
Okay. So, so that's how the mazes work. And if you look at each one of these dots, a subroom is a quarter of a room. So these are a room representing a screen in Totems. Like, you notice how the rooms usually had they had like the quarter rooms, and then they had the half rooms that were vertical and horizontal, and then they had some rooms that were just the whole screen.
Right. Yeah.
That's what I mean by subroom. A subroom is the smallest, the quarter room. So you have a quarter room, you have a half room horizontal, you have a half room vertical, and then you've got like the whole room, right? Okay, so that'll be important in about 30 seconds. So the first thing you do is you make a maze, but you don't just make one maze, you actually make, for Pete's sake, where's that button? I had a button that erased everything. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the first thing you do is you make like a whole bunch of different areas, right? And I'm just going to try and like vaguely recall how the areas go, because that's about right. And then this is the last one. Yes, something like that. Okay, so here's the first one. This is the gardens, right? And then there's a thingy thing. I don't know if you I don't know if you noticed. We saw it. I mean, you probably saw the thing from 909. Looks like you might be able to come back.
Oh, sweet.
Oh, I actually did not see it.
I did not see it either.
I see it. Okay.
Yeah. Wait, is he in the Skype?
Yeah, he's in the Skype.
He's asked, can I come back? So I let me answer.
Oh, yeah,
yes.
absolutely. Yeah, just hop back in. We'll be able to hear you again.
Yay.
You would need to put a 909 crime in on audio.
Can you get? Oh, I was supposed to say, can you? Well, I guess it's not necessary.
I'll put it very tiny in the corner.
Okay.
Yay. So basically, what I did was, and I'm going to see if I can do this correctly. So basically, here's that green is the starting point, and that's where like the garden area is that you start in the game every time.
Yep.
And then what I did was I deliberately hid the key for the next area in the previous area. So the first thing the game does is it's actually going through, it's connecting the mazes. So it finds all of the boundaries, all the borders between these mazes that are here, and then it connects them. And then after that, after it's added connections, it also adds connections in between, or adds connections like in the middle of different portions of the maze. So you can get like let's say you had a bunch of dots here, right? And you have like this guy goes to this guy, and this guy goes to this guy, and this guy goes to this guy. And then like these guys are all like not connected, right? But then and then maybe like this guy's connected, but then suddenly there's a connection right here because the game just made one up. Now you've got a little loop here, but you've got another connection that you didn't plan on. And the next thing that it does is it removes dead ends. So let me see if I can find an eraser that doesn't.
There's like a little eraser tool on the right, on the left.
Yeah.
Real quick before I forget to say, like a lot of these things you're saying are things like for example, the first thing you said essentially where each room is kind of has sort of like 4 nodes you can kind of connect from, right? So like to other rooms from. It's one of those things where like I didn't notice that when playing it, but when you said it, I was like, I immediately like, oh yeah, like there's always like there's only 8 places where you can leave a room from. Like 2 on the bottom, 2 on every side essentially. And it's one of those things where like I just didn't notice it, but when you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that's so true, And I'm just progressively getting the same sort of reaction with everything you're saying. And I'm like, oh yeah, it is like that. I just never really thought about the pattern of it. I never saw the pattern, right? And that kind of goes to show you like sometimes you don't even need smoke and mirrors. You just do it, and people won't notice. People won't see the pattern, which is very interesting. And by the way,
Yes.
999 Crime is back, I believe. So yeah, welcome back.
Sup. Your hot mic if you want to speak.
I really hope that 909 is up to telling the story because we didn't talk about this until we didn't have it talked about this yet 909, but we have a story. I think we have a story about GitHub and Game Maker Studio to tell at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want me to mention it now?
In a moment, yeah, I think would probably be. Let's see. I don't. Then you remove the dead ends. You put a bunch of treasure in there. You do a sanity count to make sure that the biomes are correct. You pick the type of rooms, so you know that like this thing can be like a whatever, can be whatever. You look for screens that only have one subroom in them, and you actually remove those. You don't want only subrooms for the most part. And this is not. I'm not saying this all in the correct order, but essentially you do a bunch of stuff. You make sure the game can do everything it needs to do. And then you do the other things. And then what I do is I put the key for each area is in the previous area. So the key for this purple area here is in the sky area. The key for the red area over here is in the purple area. And actually, the key for the sky area is in the greens area. So it's actually a progression. There's a couple of different ways you can talk about gating progression in Metroidvanias. There's the more linear design, which is like Super Metroid, and then there's a more non-linear design where you have a lot more freedom at the beginning, and that's more like whatchamacallit. Actually, relatively to this, probably would be Necrocities. Although I think Necrocities might still be more linear on the whole. But Symphony of the Night is the example often given as a non-linear. You can explore a whole ton of stuff before you actually need the mobility ability to go forward. Versus a game like Super Metroid is often much more like gated and like you're kind of are on a narrower path to start with. But yeah, that's basically how it works. And if you're wondering why it feels like you're being funneled and why it's so obvious and making sense that you do the things you do when you do them, it's because that's exactly how the world is generated. It's generated to only ideally allow you to get to the next area after you've explored and found the item in the areas preceding. And I will say I think you got a little lucky because I think at least on the web build there's a bit of a problem sometimes in the same session if you don't quit the game between sessions. Generating a game and a new seed will in fact result in something that I need to chase down for 2.0, which is not all of the essential items always generating on multiple plays in the same session. And I know this is the problem because
This did happen to me once. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So it happened to you once. I would bet you that if you took that same seed and went back in a new, fresh session, it would be fine.
It was, because it was 42. It was mine. It was the one with my name on it.
So you tried it again, and then, okay, so that makes sense. You tried it again, yeah. And that's the nature of the bug. Something about the way that I'm initializing variables is not accounting for the fact that there's been a previous session. And that's a problem, obviously, in a run-based game. The speedrunning aspect I mentioned, which you probably notice, is that there's a time limit. Every time you die, you lose like 5 minutes or whatever, like 3.5 minutes. And then the hard mode is you have 11 minutes to beat the game and only 1 life. So, so that's kind of the most roguelike or roguelite it gets. But since 99's back now, I really we had a different thing that happened with Game Maker Studio that I think he would be best the one to relate because I think he probably dealt with the brunt of it.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, so there was a GitHub issue. And because we've never used Game Maker with GitHub, and that was also kind of a thing we were learning, and sometimes some of the changes would kind of ripple back and forth in a way that was wreaking havoc a little bit. So I forgot what exactly the issue was, but I just remember sometimes when Kikaos would make a change, like it would it's kind of hard to describe, but I think it had to do with the way that the Game Maker file system is set up. Is like if you make a change, like the Game Maker project files have like a hierarchy, right? And even though they have a whole bunch of different parts, a bunch of different XML files, different assets, if you change one thing in one file, that change has to reflect in the other files. So it's all
that's not
still
kid-friendly at all.
No, it's not. It's all still one organism. So sometimes there will be a change that got made, and then I open the project in Game Maker, and then suddenly the project is unreadable now. And I'm like, oh no. So I had to go into the GitHub and I had to look at the Git diffs and all that stuff and like double check, back check, go look at all the blast gits. It was very frustrating. But once we understood what the problem was, we could mitigate it a bit. We could figure that out. We understood it, like we understood how it was breathing, but that problem also kind of reflected in the way I was injecting the code. Even if you run the level editor and come up with the good injection code, you can't just put it in. You have to put it in, then you have to go into the main project file and you have to edit stuff there, and you have to make sure it's all succinct. You have to do it by hand too, because I didn't want to automate that. It was too scary.
Something that's kind of annoying about programming in general is, we have Git, and Git is very, it's tough.
Yes.
It's kind of unfortunate because, like, I'm always like, man, there's gotta be a better way to do it, but I can't think of one. Like, it actually just seems like the best way I can think of to do things, but it can still be kind of tough. I will say the Git, like, as in the Git like command line tool, is not the greatest. There are a lot of things where like it won't give you very descriptive error messages and things like this.
It's so annoying. Mm-hmm. It's so annoying. As like a command line user myself, it's sometimes you be doing Git status and the main thing could be completely different and it won't even tell you. It'll just say everything's up to date, and I'm just like, are you serious?
Yeah. I did a lot of Git automation stuff at my internship, and it was like a lot of man, I don't know. It's like it doesn't help you. It really just does like the bare minimum to work, basically. And and I guess there's some nice part about that, and that it's very minimal. But there's it's minimal to the extreme. It doesn't have to be that minimal. It could tell you some things sometimes about what's going wrong, and give you a little bit more information. I think would be very nice. But I mean, I've heard actually, it's a long time ago. A few years ago, there was some new sort of what do you call these systems? Version control system that was getting popular for gaming, specifically game development. I don't remember what it was called. I don't know what happened to it, and I feel like I never heard of it again. But I feel like it was like a thing that was a little bit popular at some point. But we kind of seem to have no alternatives at the moment.
If you come up with the name of it, let me know, because I mean I use GitHub for my actual game job, and it's hasn't caused any issues yet. Like the only issues it's caused is like either it not saying that it's like the version, it's not saying that what version I'm on, or I mean actually it is a problem when you can't have Unity open when you're updating the Git, because then it'll like crash with like the database, the local database. Okay. So that's kind of annoying. That's kind of annoying, honestly. But I mean, otherwise, this hasn't really been as troublesome as it has with GameMaker.
I will say one thing that's nice about Godot is that their whole sort of for example, a Godot scene file, the extension is .tscn, which sounds kind of strange for scene, but it's short for text scene. So the whole scene file is text based, right? You can open the scene file in like some sort of text editor and just read essentially the scene stuff, and it's not like you're going to be editing it from there, But the nice part about it is that it works really nicely with Git. So if you have, say, like if you want to check a diff, it's very easy to see in the text what has changed about the scene. If a merge conflict or something like that, it's very easy to see what's changed in the scene. And Unity to some extent does this. Their scene files are also essentially a text file. But the thing is, there are certainly a lot more gibberish. Like it's a lot harder to parse what's going on. There's a lot of ID numbers and stuff like that. You got to trace back and figure out what does this number even mean, in this thing. So the nice thing about Godot is that the whole text scene system and all other files really that are not like other like already existing formats like MP3 or whatever. The formats that they've created themselves, they're all text based as far as I can think of. So yeah, that's pretty nice for Git. So that's my. What were you gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say text is really powerful. Like the XML format that GameMaker uses is very verbose as well. So, I mean, you can kind of see what changes, but it's like, I mean, XML by default is just verbose anyway. So
yeah.
Honestly,
I am not an XML fan in any capacity. I don't like HTML because of that. It's like XML based, and it's like, why did they choose to make everything so like you have to? It's so many extra symbols. It feels like to do something, but
nests and nests and nests.
Yeah, but yeah. So I see that was the GitHub GameMaker fiasco. Huh? So yeah, I guess going back to Necro Cities, since you're both back for this, a question I had that I want to ask was: is there a future plan for Necro Cities, or is it sort of done as is, or do you guys have a plan for the future with it, or?
Shoot, good question. I I was actually kind of making another platformer earlier, either yesterday, just like as a test on my other computer, and I want to dig through the Necro Cities code because like I did a I like that's like the little things I fixed in the way I do the platforming in that game is very different from how I did it in other games, and it's kind of efficient, and I really like how I like that about it. So that's something I'm definitely going to be salvaging. But for Necro Cities itself, I mean, if there's anything I want to change, I want to make the ending a bit less just like a screen that just says "good job." I want to like have like an actual like, thing. But I mean, I don't really have any big super plans for it. If that's what you're asking.
Okay, I gotcha.
I think I would echo that. I think it would be nice to maybe just go through and do a little bit more polished than we really had time for. As mentioned, we were kind of in the end game at the last possible moment, basically. And I personally wouldn't mind like going through and doing like a couple of art boards. Board is such an old school gamer way to describe a screen. But like just to do a couple of older sort of a couple of art screens, like maybe just to give like a framing for like why this guy is trapped on the internet and what happens when he gets out. Like most people don't know this, but there's another character and we don't know if maybe like she was trapped on the internet and he was gonna have to get her out or something. But like there's another character that literally just exists on like an A sprite file in my computer and does not exist in the game anymore. I was just like workshopping and we ended up I think at one point there might have even been like a small amount of talk about like maybe giving players a choice. I don't know if we were talking about giving players a choice even, but like there's like a variant of the sprite that like was never used basically.
Oh yeah, I remember now. And also there was like the sword attack that we have.
Yeah, he had a sword and that was never used either. So like we have other stuff. We have stuff that we could do relatively organically to expand on it, and like even just writing a brief like Saturday morning cartoon level dude trapped in the internet storyline expressly might have helped a little bit with the framing. Although I like the idea of leaving things a little more vague so people come up with interpretations like he used the Roman Empire to describe the fall of the early internet, which makes me so happy. I'm sorry, that was just like the greatest thing ever.
That actually reminds me. That was literally, I think it was this is last week in I was taking a philosophy class, and he said some statement something like man, it's just something like silence is silence is the peace in emptiness or something like that, right? And his point was like that there are some statements that are so wild where it's like, what the heck does that mean? And people will come up with just varying interpretations of the statement, And the funny thing is that like he was kind of smart about it, and he just asked, "What does this mean?" And a lot of people were like, "I don't know what that means." And some people were like, "It means this," And he was like, "It means nothing, actually." Just said some words, basically. But no, yeah, it just reminded me. It's kind of funny that left to our own interpretations, we'll find patterns where maybe there were not any intended, or in some cases, like with Totems of the Yonder, we will miss patterns where there were most certainly patterns intended, and that is for the better, oftentimes.
Well, I was kind of glad. I'm kind of glad to hear that you didn't get it right away. Like I had some Nifless inspirations. If you ever played it within a Deep Forest or Knit, those would be the games to think about there. And I also had a lot of ZZT inspirations for that idea, that sort of like way of doing things, and that way of putting the world together. So I'm kind of glad in a way to see that it wasn't caught. Not because like I think it would be kind of cool if it was caught for a different reason, but the fact that it was just a simple thing that was just kind of like, well, that was just kind of like that didn't occur as like a huge pattern in the world design kind of makes me happy, because I didn't go out of my way to make it. It's conversely to what I said about like my influences, there is the converse worry that it would just be like super boxy, essentially. And probably now, if you go back and play it again now, you're going to see like, oh yeah, I know what Dan means. This is very boxy, but like, the fact that that could even not occur makes me happy. Like at the birth. I mean, maybe it did occur, maybe it's not in the just maybe Boxy did occur, and I'm putting words in your mouth. Sorry.
No, you're right. So, yeah. So something I gotta ask is, what games have inspired the sort of your style of game? So, as we've seen, specifically you, Kai, have done multiple Metroidvanias in a month. Was there sort of a Metroidvania that started this all? Where you're like, okay, this is the kind of game I really like, or not? What games inspire you and change the way that you make games?
Knit was a big one, so that's like a little like character. They appear within a deep forest, and then there's a game where you play as one of them. I think that's how it is. And that's within a deep forest is like a really deep cut. It's like part Metroidvania, part like frustration platformer, almost. And essentially, it's about bouncy balls trying to save the world. It's just what it is. Like literally, just like a dude is trying to freeze the world because otherwise he's worried that the world sees the future and like the world's going to get like blown up by nukes, so he freezes the world so that nobody can blow it up or something weird like that. It's a weird concept, but it's kind of a nifty like thing with like lots of like 90s like demo CD down tempo music and like cool bounce and stuff. But like a lot of that sort of like vibe and atmosphere is also in Knit. Let's see. A lot of the Metroidvanias that come out recently, Hollow Knight, The Messenger, things like that. Those end up being influences. Although I didn't play a lot of things until after. Like the first Metroidvania that I made was called Family Rescue Adventure, and that was a game that I made for Metroidvania Month 10, actually back in 2020. That one was pretty straightforward. It was much more rudimentary than any of the ones that I've made since. I don't know, like there's just been a lot of games that have influenced me. Probably on the whole, I may have been more influenced by like precision platformer. So like N++ is one of my favorite modern games in terms of like if you're looking at games like modern like Unity games. I think that's one that would be an example. If I remember correctly, that's what it's made in. Celeste, as platformers go, one of my key probably influences nowadays. Which, and then just, the people around me are also influences. So like I did my last two with 909. I did a previous one with a guy named Zephyr. And I'm kind of blessed that I've managed to somehow, all according to plan, to sort of somehow recruit both 909 and Zephyr to work with me on the next jam, because we want to try some new things, and I know Zephyr wants to try some hand-drawn stuff, and I'm excited to be able to work with like a team of people, and then also to get somebody in to do music that I made Megazeus games with for many, many years. So like a lot of my influences is like stage-based platformers, and a lot of my influences also procedurally generated stuff. Weapon Hacker comes to mind as a game that here's the problem is Weapon Hacker, at a real quick glance, it looks like it might be an asset, and that's not a great virtue necessarily to have in terms of marketing, and it's a real shame, honestly, because it isn't a bad game. It's actually very good, and it's very hard to like talk to somebody and be like, hey, I just want to be clear. I know the graphics are not what, you would necessarily are expecting this, type of thing to be, and it's not necessarily going to be what's going to grab you right at the start. But just play this game for like 20 minutes, and you'll see why it's amazing. There was a big budget, like croc-gen Metroidvania that came out called Chasm. And if you've heard about Chasm, if you haven't heard about Chasm, you should watch a video by a guy named Ingenious Clown about Chasm. Chasm is not a bad game, but it's not necessarily good. It looks better than Weapon Hacker, just kind of on an objective level, even though the styles are graphically different. But it isn't a good game in the same way. Weapon Hacker is a tightly designed, arcadey Metroidvania experience with permadeath. And it has a creative, system, a creative thing. there's a lot of stuff that you can do that is amazing, and it sort of surpasses what you expect. And I actually played a robot named Fight, but I played it before, and partly as part of my research, I think, a little bit. It might have been kind of a quasi-research thing that I did that. I hadn't played a robot named Fight, which is weird, because, like, you would expect that I would have from the fact that I made a proc-gen Metroidvania. But no, robot named Fight was not on my list for a while, and I think because it looks kind of gross as a game, and it is kind of gross. To be clear, it's also a quality game, but it's gross. It says, you don't really know how to sell. Like, if you look at it, just like there's like eldritch horrors and like flesh things everywhere, and it's just like, I don't want this in a game. I like games with sunshine and rainbows. Zelda is like as dark as I like getting, and that one is darker in my opinion. But it's sorry, that's a huge long ramble. All but to say, Weapon Hacker's biggest influence on the most recent stuff. Generally speaking, I will play just about anything that has a decent. Generally, things that are bright and colorful that don't have like horribly messed up worlds for no reason. Like even Hollow Knight, it's a dark game, but it's not like in the same way that like Dark Souls is. Like I play Dark Souls and I'm just like, I don't even want to pretend to be in this world because it's just that dark.
Yeah.
So that's my that. I don't know if that's really my. I don't know if that's my hot take, but that's something that I have a strong feeling about. But generally speaking, anything with good design, especially in a platforming vein, I will enjoy. And just random RPGs. I was a 16-bit, 32-bit era person. My biases go towards Chrono Trigger still. So there's that.
Gotcha. I know. Crime. You're also You're very so. I guess you haven't mentioned it. I don't think you mentioned it on the last interview. I could be wrong. You definitely. I was gonna say dabble. It's not dabble. It's more than that into retro gaming stuff. So, where does your inspiration come from? And what's affected the way you make games now?
So that's a good question. For this past game that we made, specifically, my influence was Super Mario Bros. 2 and Super Mario World. I just came off of a playthrough of Super Mario World, like literally before the jam. So I think a lot of those ideas were kind of fresh in my head, even if they didn't get implemented. Just like how smooth that game felt, I wanted to capture that, and I really tried hard to because Nintendo games have like the thing about Nintendo games is that even if they end up being mediocre, they're always gonna feel good at least, like almost always, at least for the newer games. And I want to get that mark of quality, like even if like above like a lot of other things. So and in the past I've made a lot of like kind of like rage / difficult platformers with death counters and stuff. So that's like a mark of my design, I guess. So I just included that. As far as the platformers go, I also really like arcade games, like a lot. So, and arcade games tend to be hard. So I think that's also a part of like the stuff that I like. In terms of other stuff, I play a lot of JRPGs. And I'm also inspired by proc gen as well, procedural generation. I played there's a game I played growing up called Fatal Labyrinth on the Sega Genesis, and that is a rogue-like. It's not a roguelite. It's a roguelike because it's almost a direct port of the original Rogue, just with graphics and music and stuff. It's a pretty cool game. It's pretty memorable. I played that a lot growing up. I really liked that one. And I'm kind of drawn to the idea of like how just RPGs in general really fascinate me because of how you can craft a giant world in like a small package. And that's kind of why I'm also attracted to old games, because you have these big fantastic worlds with tons of monsters, characters, storylines and stuff that are all in this tiny cartridge for a piece of hardware that came out 40 years ago. That's kind of inspiring.
There are certainly a lot of hot takes to be had about the comparison between retro and new games and everything in between.
Yes,
that kind of stuff. But before we go any further, some chats we got to read. Referring to Kai, Sir Stone says, "I'm surprised you played more games outside of Rotato," which Rotato has definitely been mentioned a multitude of times in the Discord. And then Kai said, to Sir Stone, "I am large. I contain multitudes, and be right back grabbing salad." So that's where he's at right now. And in reference to what 99 Crime said about Nintendo, Alex Egbert says, "What do you think is the secret sauce for that Nintendo quality feel?"
That's a good question. I don't know. I think that they really like. That's a good question, really. But one thing about Nintendo is if you go back like to us like past a certain time, you don't really feel that quality as much. Even if the games have cool design choices, some of them just kind of feel like old games. Like the original Super Mario Bros. I feel like is really overrated and doesn't control as well as people are as like at least I'm used to. Even though I played it when I was younger, it's like that wasn't my first Mario game, so I'm not really attached to it. But that game, even though it has a lot of cool mechanics, all the games after it control like 10,000 times better. They feel less slippery. The jump arc is predictable. It's like once you figure out how to play, it's like you're not even thinking about it. You're thinking about playing the game, not how to play the game. And you're never really fighting with the engine in Nintendo games as much. Maybe I could be wrong with the new Zelda games. I could be wrong about that. I don't play a lot of Zelda, so I don't. Maybe that's a hot take. I don't know. But yeah, you're not really fighting with the engine as much, and I think that's kind of if you're not fighting with the engine, that means that the game is probably good enough to like sustain itself. You understand? So, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, we are approaching 9:30, so I feel like we should wrap this up pretty soon. So it's kind of unfortunate because this has been we have another chat, I think. Oh no, I'm imagining things. That is not another chat.
Last thing, I just remembered. Nintendo actually has shipped out development to some of their games to like other studios over the years. So, some other companies like Hudson Soft and them like might even have a little bit more experience than Nintendo in developing these games. So they would like consult them and like work back and forth. So Nintendo isn't like one of those companies that's not averse to working with third parties. That's like most of their games have been actually developed by third parties. So that's one thing to consider as well.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I wonder if like how much sort of oversight there is. I'm sure there's actually quite a lot. I would guess. For to keep Nintendo's sort of brand image up, but they can't have they can't have poor quality stuff. So I assume there's a lot of like oversight, and I wonder how much of their own talent they kind of like give over to them. Sort of like help, to get that feel and other things like that. Or how much of it is simply just like the whoever is contracted out to. They figure it out, and Nintendo just makes sure everything's good, and goes out. But before we wrap this up, so I already asked you, and then I'm crying. I didn't ask Kai. What is a
Kai's mid-bite?
Sorry, I caught you off guard. What is a hot take you have, either about gaming or it can be about art in general? Yeah.
It's actually interesting. I had one, and then I posted it in a DM with my other main Metroidvania teammate, and he had a gentle correction to suggest, and I think I might be in agreement with him. But generally, I think that originality is overrated, and originality colloquially called, like where you're kind of trying to find like just a new idea, like a brand new idea. I think that in terms of I'm sort of reading. Apparently, he'd gotten off of like a day full of like having to talk about things and give talks, and gave like a huge rant about it. But that basically the idea is kind of now coming in nuanced from the feedback that I'd gotten when I initially shared what I thought my hot take was when you asked the question. That it's not so much originality. It's not so much originality that you really need. It's more of an original voice. It's formed from like being in a situation and giving a unique response to your context that is not or at least a uniquely flavored response to your context. It's not so much about having like a new idea or iterating necessarily, or innovating per se. It's more like an iteration that is actually sort of your own in a meaningful way. And to be clear, I think, for example, if you have a game like The Messenger and a game like Shovel Knight, and Shovel Knight came first, so maybe The Messenger is also responding to Shovel Knight, but you have two of those games both responding to moments in game history several years after the fact, and The Messenger even going further and responding to multiple moments in gaming history because it's got the stage-based platformer that turns into a Metroidvania. Sorry, spoiler alert, it's been a while. And is The Messenger really that unique aside from that genre shift? No, not necessarily, but it does its thing with humor, and it's got a sort of a unique voice. Sabotage Studio has a unique voice. Likewise, that same studio has made now a 16-bit RPG, clearly highly reminiscent of Chrono Trigger, down to hiring Yasunori Mitsuda to do two or three of the tracks. Is that unique? Maybe not, but it's got a little bit of a vibe of like Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, and other games of like the 1632-bit era, and it seems like it may have Sabotage's unique voice on it, which is something. Even if it's not necessarily the absolute most innovative game ever, it's fresh because it's got a uniqueness to it. So that's my hot take. Originally, it was just going to be originality is overrated, just make it a game, basically, which is, I still think, kind of more important in the sense that, like, in the way that most people think of the word originality, but sort of been nuanced a little bit because of Zephyr and his thoughts on the matter earlier this week.
Oh, that's interesting. No, so I gotta turn this to Irving and Ben
hot take
because okay, well there you go. Because this is a general art focused hot take, and these guys are artists. so what do you guys think about that? Is originality and overrated quality? Is it more about the originality of your voice and that specifically?
Are you asking me or?
Yeah, both of you. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, no, I guess it's even more apparent the more mature your art form is. Like, movies are really old. And when Ben speaks, we're going to get even older, especially if we're talking music, just in general. But for movies, it's old enough where almost anything anyone says is unique is just because they didn't watch the right things before. For example, one of the most recent things where everyone was like, "Oh, it's genre defining and it's crazy," was Everything Everywhere All at Once, right? Which, you strip it down, you look at it from a writing perspective, it's really just a hero's journey. Like every other hero's journey hits the same beats, but it feels fresh because the voice is unique, like exactly what Kai was saying. It's contextually different. It's got its own things to say, even though it's not trying to exit a format that is very familiar. And I think that's fine. What's wrong with that? We need art that's contextualized to today. We want living art, not dead art. So that's what I've got to say about it.
Gotcha. What do you think, Ben?
I think it's possible that, you can be trying so hard to be original that you are the same as everybody else. But I don't know. I think there's nothing wrong necessarily with trying to do something new, because it's kind of just I think how art works in some ways is that maybe not everything is new that you do, but there's a lot of synthesis of things that is kind of what pushes art forward. That's why, I take a lot of issue with people talking about genres today. People talk about such tiny genres, and they're not useful terms really if you stop and think about it, because music is so fluid, and it's kind of in the interaction of these somewhat different styles that something new is born. And well, what is that? You know, where does one thing kind of meld into another thing? But if we, just stick with like rigid things, then we never get anything new. And nothing new is better, but sometimes it's important to have new things. So, I don't know if it like you actually want to go out of your way to like you always want to go out of your way to do something that nobody's ever done before and reinvent the musical wheel. But just totally sticking with what has been done before and what works is also kind of a little bit boring.
Yeah, that reminds me. I don't remember where I heard this from, but someone, I can't remember, but someone said basically new cultures are formed when old cultures, specifically, like cultures with a tradition, contact something new. So, and that happens in a variety of like circumstances. So it could be just two cultures like literally blending in, some border region or something like this. Or it could be old cultures entering new land. Or it can be old cultures in new situations like a failing empire or some catastrophe or, I don't know, or like trade conditions change or whatever. It's like something that has depth touches something new and then it feels original, but humans are always the same, and that kind of reminds me of that. And yeah, I'm all for originality 100%. I just think some people just get too fixated on that as the only thing that makes art good, and that's kind of crazy. So yeah.
The risk of being a little bit. I won't prolong this too long, I promise. But at the risk of being a little bit, maybe snarky is not the right word. Maybe presumptuous is the right word, because I can't read minds, right? But I feel like sometimes you see these people in these game dev servers, and they're like, "Yeah, I want to make a game, but I want it to be something really original." And you're just like, "Okay, but do you want to make a game, or do you just want to make an excuse about why you're not making a game?" Because this is a game jam server, and there's opportunities for you to actually create something, and you can take that opportunity and risk being slightly unoriginal, or you could go on about wanting to be original and never make anything. And I'm not going to lie to you, like, I'm not the absolute most original game maker. I think it's pretty clear which option I've chosen, but not to get too biblical, because I don't really think this expression strictly necessarily applies. Although maybe it does in a very broad sense of like how you live your life. But I feel like I've kind of chosen the better part here. I'd rather just make the thing and not be 100% original, rather than like worry too much about like whether the story that I've told is full of hacking cliches. Who cares? If it's got decent aesthetics and controls well, and players don't feel hurt in a bad way when they play it. In a bad way is a weird way of saying that, but if you played platformers like I have, you know what I mean. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now.
Gotcha. Yeah. And no, yeah. So as for what I feel about that, I think I pretty much agree. Like whenever I think of game ideas, as probably as cliche as the advice is, what if you combine two different game ideas or something like that, right? And it's not original really in any sense at all, because you're literally taking two ideas and making it your own, right? And the new thing itself might not even be original, right? Someone's probably thought of it before. So, but that is my approach oftentimes to thinking about game ideas. Just like, with my current thing with it's been in tech demo like limbo forever with the hover car racing game. It is literally just like take a racing game and now you have hover cars, and like neither of those concepts are original in any capacity. I think the combination of them, it's very strange how I have actually never played a hover car racing game or heard of one. Wait, that's not true. I've heard of them. I've heard of a few of them actually, but they're not what I'm thinking, I suppose. They're a lot more arcadey than what I'm thinking. Something more physically accurate was the idea. So like it'd be more like take Forza and make it like a hover car racing game or something. Maybe even a little bit more physically accurate or something. So yeah. Anyways, that's not really that's not really that novel of an idea. It's just interesting. It sounds like a fun time. And there are a lot of chats that we did not read. So let's get to it. We have 99 Crime says he's telling big true facts right now. True. Alex says it's original and it's edgy. 99 Crime says rock is such a broad net. And yeah, I feel that because oftentimes if someone asks me what my favorite genre of music is, I will say rock. And it's like there is a lot of rock I don't actually like. The reason why I say that is because it is, and I notice every time I say this, I always think like, man, what kind of rock do I actually think I'm listening to though? You know, because I feel like everyone has their own assumption, right? Probably based on what they listen to, you know. So I say like rock, like someone could be thinking, oh, you like, I don't know, you like Green Day. Not really, personally. Not that they're bad. It's just not my cup of tea, you know. But there are a lot of people who listen to Green Day, so if I say I like rock, they might be thinking, oh, you're of course talking about like, you know, some punk rock stuff right here, some early 2000s stuff. It's like, no, that's not really what I mean, you know. Or some people might think, I don't know, you like metal or something. It's like metal's okay, but that's not typically my subgenre of choice, I suppose. And even within subgenres, like as Ben was saying, right? Like it's like sometimes you can't define well what an artist is, you know. And so, but I say rock anyway because like it encompasses, I guess, the music I listen to typically, you know. And it's just kind of it's easier than explaining like, okay, well, I like this artist and this artist and this artist and this artist, and you haven't heard of any of them probably, but it's I just have to hope that you get the right idea. Right. In some other chats, so Keikawa says, referring to Alex, we can talk about Edmund Macmillan another time. Alex says, Diddy Kong Racing, was that referring to hover car racing? I have no idea. Is that a hover car racing game? I've actually never heard of Diddy Kong Racing. Keikawa says, Diddy Kong Racing, but make it physically accurate. Alex says, Dikara, but it's dark and hyper realistic. Okay. Not what I think of when I think of Diddy Kong, but you know. Yeah. So that's all we got. I guess that would be the end of the segment, right? This is a good talk. I really enjoyed this a lot, and I got to do more interviews now. Is what I'm realizing. So.
Diddy Kong Racing was basically sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say Diddy Kong Racing is basically if you took like Mario Kart, but you added like some of the adventure game elements of like Mario 64 to it. And then you made it with Donkey Kong characters, primarily.
Okay, interesting.
That's approximately how Diddy Kong Racing works, but yeah, you can use a car, and then depending on the course, you can also use a plane or a hovercraft. And like, different courses need different vehicles, and I think there's a few that even you can use all three, but Alex would probably know more about that than I would. But as far as the basics go, it's basically like a Mario Kart-ish game with adventure game elements, like 3D platformer adventure game elements.
Okay, gotcha. Actually, I think technically Mario's what's the newest? Mario Kart 8, the newest one. Technically, Mario Kart 8 has hovercraft sections, but they basically handle the same way as the normal cars anyway, so it doesn't matter. But yeah. All right. With that, I guess we ought to move to the next section. Kai did say you'd be sticking around for the next section. 99 Crime, do you know if you're going to be sticking around for the following segments?
I'll probably stick around in the chat.
Okay, sounds good. All right, well, I guess we will be saying goodbye to 99 Crime in voice, at least, in audio. So, yeah, you know, so both of you, actually, you know, thank you for joining us. He's gone. Thank you for joining us. Really do appreciate it. It was a good talk, and I feel like there's so much more. There's so much to learn from you guys. There's like you guys have like a very unique knowledge bank.
Infinite episode.
There's infinite episode potential here. You know.
Yeah. They can always come back.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah. With that, thanks for watching this segment of the Mixed Media Podcast, and stick around for the next watching live. Not watching live. Subscribe. So you can get the next. That is a very niche reference. It's not actually niche. The YouTuber who said it is popular, but I don't know if anyone will remember that specific section of the YouTube video I'm referring to. So, yeah, subscribe, please, and you'll get a notification when our next segment comes out. Not that we upload our episodes in segments anyways. I keep saying this anyways, as if we do. One day we will.
One day they will be.
So,
man.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for watching, and yeah.
Sweet. All right. And next up, we'll be arguing with Reddit. And I'm going to try to speed run it as quickly as possible. So here we go.
Mixed Media Movies.
And welcome back to Mixed Media. If you've been watching live this whole time, shout out to y'all. Thank you for tuning in. And if you aren't subscribed, please take a moment right now. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Check out our long catalog of Mixed Media episodes. But for now, while you're doing that, we're going to play a little Arguing with Reddit. Now, I have the same problem again as last time when we were interviewing Scott. We have 4 people on, but my Arguing with Reddit screen is not 4-person capable. So we're going to jankly bring up the articles. I don't remember exactly how I did it last time. I think I just
said
posted
you will
them.
hop off, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if you want to hop up, it's up to you. Don't do it for me, for my sake.
It's fine. I was honored to be on, and I will. If there's an opportunity later on, I'm sure I'd love to join you all again. But yeah, no, it'll be easier if we can all see the Arguing with Reddit together. So I'll just hop off and also be in the chat with 99 and the rest.
Sweet.
Right.
Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No problem.
All right. I just realized we didn't reintroduce ourselves, so let's do that real quick. So, my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella, based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
Hi, my name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
And my name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
And Kai's still here. Let's see here. Oh, I think he just hopped off. Yeah, I think so. So let me pull him off screen here. Live troubleshooting, as apparently our audience enjoys. But let's see.
He's actually in the Skype call. It says just frozen. So I don't know.
Oh, okay.
You didn't get like the left of the call message.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. Let's see here. Let's do that. Okay. All right, we should be roughly okay now. Awkwardly trying to remember how to even bring up my screen here. There we go. Okay. So if you don't know, Arguing with Reddit is a segment where we discuss hot takes from the internet. Anything interesting in our respective fields. My co-hosts here have found hot takes from Reddit or around the internet, I think all from Reddit today, and I will react to them live. I have not seen any of the ones except for the one I picked for myself, so that's how we play Arguing with Reddit. It's a good time, but we're going to speed run it today because, we basically have we have very little time left, so I'm going to try to speed run through this. Any chats I should read, or let's see. No. Talk about Skype. Okay, great. So the first one, I'll just pick from Ben, if you want to explain to me what it is.
Sure, I'll just read it. It's pretty quick. Person said the title is "How We Feeling About Nope 2022." Just rewatched this movie for the 3rd time, and I gotta say, this or Us is definitely Jordan Peele's best work. I mean, Get Out was phenomenal, but I prefer his 2 other films. Nope, in my humble opinion, was a really special movie last year. Kind of like Us, whenever he comes out with a new movie, I go see it in theaters, and it's always a standout movie for the year.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I have not seen it.
We had a discussion on this. Was that maybe... I'm trying to remember who was talking about that. Was that Scott who was talking about it?
Maybe Scott had mentioned it.
Or it was Nathan, and I know we've talked
about it. I wouldn't have mentioned this. I don't think.
Really?
I think it was Scott because
Okay.
I think what's the director's name?
Jordan Peele.
Jordan Peele.
Yeah, Jordan Peele. I think I do recall him mentioning Jordan Peele. So.
Okay. I know we had some kind of conversation about it a few weeks ago. I guess it was with me and Scott. Or having that conversation. Okay.
Well, I can comment on the other 2 films because I've seen the other 2. So I agree that Us is actually better than Get Out overall, although I say that now that I think about it, I'm like, there are kind of pro-cons trade-off with each of those films, I think. I think Get Out is just a little bit more bare, and you can feel the lack of ability to execute large ideas because of lack of resource, because it was his first film and it was a much smaller budget than Us. So I'd be really curious as to how that film would have turned out if he had more resources. Also, that film, I think, executed a very... I don't want to sound derogatory, but the idea is a bit smaller, and it executed that small idea very well. And with very few flaws, and just visually awesome and memorable, and just good casting and everything. Us, also great casting, but a bigger idea, executed that idea really well as well, but I think was less fresh feeling overall. But I feel like that's just nitpicking. I don't know how to compare them. I think he's done a great job. I haven't seen Nope yet. When I saw it, the marketing confused the crap out of me. So I wanted to see it. I just didn't get a chance to see it when it came out in theaters.
Right, I agree. The marketing for it does not it's not prepare you for the kind of horror film that it is.
Oh, is it like proper horror?
No, but it's. I think I've talked about this a few times. It's just really disturbing because of like some of the first-person violence, or you're seeing some really violent stuff as the character.
We did talk about this. Yes.
Yeah.
This is not on with Scott, but we did talk about this.
We've talked about this several. I know it's come up several times in the past.
Okay.
But I think we did talk about it with Scott a few weeks ago. Yeah, to me that's how I describe it. It's a lot of like first-person violence. It's really kind of disturbing. And then like I don't know. To me, the rest of it is just not that interesting or good, really. I mean, it's all kind of in service of like the grand idea. Like, there's just some like kind of silly like they try to throw in like some jump scares in there too, and there's like some really weird humor that doesn't land, and I don't know. Like, if I was just reading through like the first comment here, and this person's like, the whole middle of the movie is spectacular. I'm like, no, it's not. The middle of the movie is like
the worst part.
I don't know. It's a person thinks that it all it's horrifying and terrifying, and it really fleshes out the characters. I mean, I guess in some sense, but not like in an interesting way, really. It's just kind of, to me, it all just feels kind of like in service of like some really horrifying moments, and then like, oh, but we're just gonna treat it all with levity anyway in the end.
Interesting. Would you compare it? That actually kind of sounds interesting. Is it cartoonish? Like, is it like Tarantino level? Like because in Tarantino films, it's quite bloody, but it's also like there's levity behind it, but it doesn't feel gruesome because it's so cartoonish. If that makes sense.
I don't know. I don't know. I guess it's kind of cartoonish, but then like the moments that are terrifying and horrifying are like truly terrifying. Like it's in a way that like if I watch like just like a regular horror film, or like I don't know, I watch like Vikings or something, like people getting their heads chopped off, like it's like maybe gruesome, but it's not like horrifying on a personal level. And like they take great pains to like make those horrifying first-person violence scenes like quite detailed, and that's not the kind of like cinematic experience that I want. And then then they're just gonna kind of treat it with levity too, like I don't know.
Off-putting.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I'm gonna have to check that out one day. Interesting. This next one I'll do my next. So this one was the first thing that actually organically came up in my feed, and I was like, okay, perfect, I'm done. I found my take. It's from r/short film, and it kind of relates to the interview that we did with Scott, except it's about shorts instead of about features. So it's my first short movie. Hello, everyone. I'm new. I'm writing this post because I'm about to make my first short film and would like some advice. This short has a $0 budget, so I would need some advice on how to best shoot it and how to best use the phone camera. Okay, so that's the general post. And I realize I don't think I've ever talked about shoestring short film budgets or short film sorts of things and how you might go about it, so this is a good prompt for that. First, realize that there's no such thing as a $0 budget short film at all. Like, it's literally mandated that you spend money on anything that you do because, I mean, at the very least, your time is worth something. And even if you're just shooting nature and nature is free and you're just grabbing your phone that you already own and you're going to shoot it, well, I mean, you've got to take the time to make it good. You know, it's still going to cost you something. And the biggest thing, before you even run with this idea of, I should do a $0 film, you really should know what that means, because it's not necessarily a bad thing to do, but you should do it intentionally, knowing what it's going to cost you, which is all your time. So usually when you trade off money to make something cheaper, you're usually losing time, especially in film. You're going to have less people to help you. You're going to have less competent help, unless you're lucky. And so it's just going to take you a lot longer to get things done. And that just is what it is. The second thing is you won't own your film at all. So you're also trading off control. Not at all, I shouldn't say that. But you won't own your film in the same way that you would own it if things were simple and contractual. So what I mean by that is because everyone's doing you favors if you're working with other people, it's a lot harder to make someone do anything. I mean, other than convincing them it's the good thing for the project, which then you have to be working with good people, right, who can recognize what's good for the project. And that's not necessarily the case when you don't have a choice, because you don't have a choice in who you're working with. That aside, so let's say you've understood the trade-offs. It's going to cost you more time, and you're going to lose some artistic authority over the end product because you can't tell people what to do who are not being paid, and you can't make things happen because there's no contractual exchange going on. Beware of the phone idea. Be very, very wary of the phone idea, because it sounds really nice. You have a phone in your pocket in practice, in principle, but in practice, there's a lot of problems with using your phone, primarily just on a practical level. You have very little control of how the sensor reads out into memory. Basically, we have very little control over what the sensor is seeing and how it gets recorded. And the biggest issue is going to be in noise. Now, you can pick a concept that works well with that, but those concepts have been done a lot. So it depends on what you're going for. If you're trying to go for a unique vibe, it's going to be very hard to accomplish that because everyone's done a found footage horror film with their phone. That's like hyper common, or everyone's done like a security camera film or something like this, like where we're taking advantage of the dankness of the camera or whatever. So, and everyone's done a social media film where, there's 1,000 of these, and honestly, all of those things have been done at a super high level. So if you don't mind that, if you're fine occupying those genres or occupying those sort of tropes, and you just want to make the best one of those things that you want, that's fine. But if you can, there are cheap cameras that don't cost very much that have same or better quality than your phone that allow you to have full creative control or near full creative control, namely GoPros or GoPro style, like action style cameras. So that'd be my biggest thing. You can pick one up for like $300, $200. Used, you could pick up one up for like $100 maybe.
Why are cameras so expensive? I remember when I asked you for camera recommendations to the podcast, like, oh, maybe a GoPro, cheap round like $300. Like, man, that is some cash.
Well, I mean, if you think about your phone, right? Your phone's usually like $1,000, right? So it depends on how you're looking at it. But
Is
there's
$300 a phone like the camera? Or I guess it's not as good. I guess so. I guess it's less than $30 with the phone. But never mind. Was like a sizable portion of the phone bill like the camera?
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea, but I presume less than that, just because the sensor's smaller, the optics are smaller and less good. Yeah, I assume. I don't know. But GoPros these days, they have pretty filmic settings where you can put things in a pretty flat profile. You have control over all aspects of your camera, and you can do things like that. So consider that. You can even borrow one from a friend. Like, so many people have little action cameras. You might even just be able to get one for free. Okay. And the last two things I'll say is, actually, this person says it right down here. Sound. I can't emphasize this enough. You can make a movie that doesn't feel very expensive with good sound technique. That might mean you have to ADR, but that also means you have to ADR well. You can't do it bad. Or you might have to...
Don't let any of your actors change their voice from growing up.
Yes, that happened to me. Or you, when you write your script, write a script that's friendly to as little on-set sound as possible. So you could do a dialogueless film, and that's such a broad concept that you can be quite free to do whatever the heck you want and still be interesting. You can do a dialogueless film with good music, right? Like that can fill the gap, basically. So yeah, think about sound a lot. What is this person saying? This person seems to have good ideas. Story is key, 100,000%. Write a good story. Keep it short and sweet. Also agree. When you don't have money, it needs to be short. Again, depends on what your goal is. If your goal is just to learn from it, it can be as long or as short as you want. But if your goal is to get into festivals or to show people for them to for sure like it, you might not be able to overstay more than 10 minutes, which should be enough. Oh, the person literally says 10 minutes. Wow. Okay. This person's great. Get some white bed sheets or translucent shower curtains. Absolutely. Learn how to bounce light. And learn how to use cheap lighting stuff to get that done. A lot of times, incandescent bulbs are your friend because they tend to be really clean sources of light and very cheap, right? Again, there's no such thing as a $0 budget, but I'm sure when you said $0, you're okay spending $5 on some light bulbs. Like, that's probably okay. Let's see. Plan everything for the shoot down to the minute, 100,000%. Buy everyone food. And again, you have to pay, you have to spend money, and you must buy people food. This is my pet peeve with small productions. You cannot not buy people food. You will have the angriest, most resentful cast and crew that you can ever ask for. Some people, inexplicably won't eat because they have to spend money on it, and they just don't want to do that. And I get that. Not the not eating part, but I get that people will resent you for it because the least you could do hospitality-wise is feed people. And doesn't have to be that expensive. You can get food donations. I've been able to do that on a short film before, and you get food donations from people for either cheap or nothing in some cases. If you ask a local chain who just likes the concept of helping a film student out. What is in your vision? Don't be a tyrant on set. Be open to ideas. You ultimately have the final say, but you want to make sure that these people are helping you make you feel included. And again, that goes back to the first thing I said, which is if you're doing something for $0, you cannot be a tyrant at all. Not that you should be a tyrant ever, but you really don't have the right to do that. So play nice with everybody. I would add onto this list is get someone who can be your organizational partner, who's willing to do it for free, who can handle basically all the logistics, the whatever little money there is, and that way you can have another person who is also invested in the end product tell people what to do too, so you don't feel like the only, I guess, tyrant. Because sometimes people think you're a tyrant and you're not being a tyrant, right? Like, it's just the dynamic of them not being paid. So, like, it's nice to have other people who are on board with the project, who understand the vision, and can organize things and let people know what is good and bad as well. So there you go. That's my advice. But it's all in the writing, really. That's the number one advice, is write something that you can execute with a small budget, which is not everything, unfortunately. So don't make a sci-fi film. There you go.
Yeah. Don't make. You're not gonna make Star Wars with zero money.
Absolutely. It goes for every single art form, right? Like, don't make a 100-hour game, right? Is like the same type of thing.
Oh yeah. So we've talked about it many times. Everyone who wants to, we've never written anything, but their first piece is a hour-long symphony.
Yeah, not recommended. This one's from you, Nathan, if you want to explain.
Yeah. So the question is about 4-minute movies, and was talking about how due to the writer's strike, there might be essentially a sort of gap in movie theater releases. There's not as many movies being released, and if that would make an opening for foreign films, and if that would be something that people would want to see.
That's interesting. I never thought about that. So foreign films went through a bit of a mini trend, particularly Korean films, with Parasite sort of not being leading the charge, because it wasn't the first film in the slew of popular Korean films, but it was like kind of the apex. And since sort of maybe a year or two ago, I haven't really heard much hype around these foreign films, maybe particularly because the domestic film market got hype again for a little bit. I would love that. I just don't know. I'm not sure if it would happen. Just because a lot of this stuff gets decided well in advance, but all of it sometimes happens last minute. So, I don't really know. That's a good question. Maybe that does happen. But it would be really great. Not because they're particularly foreign, but because particularly Korean and Japanese films right now, European films are kind of in the same hole as the United States. But Korean and Japanese films tend to be, and actually I shouldn't trash on the European films as much, because they are more in this direction than the American cinema right now. But they tend to be a lot more just artful, but like accessible. Artful but accessible. That's what Parasite was, right? Like, that's why it was so popular. It was artful, tasteful. It reminded people of what original filmmaking looks like when someone has a contained idea and executes it well. I think the film is personally extremely overrated, but that's a very hot take. It's one of the most overrated films I've ever seen. But it doesn't mean it was bad. It was good. Yeah, I think that we need a dose of originality to jaunt the domestic market in the right direction. So, I would be happy if that were happen. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. All right, that's the speed run of arguing with Reddit. There you go. If you have your own hot takes, or if you disagree with anything I said, please let me know in the Discord. You can go to mixedmediapodcast.com. There's a link to the Discord. Click the Discord icon, or there's a link in the description. It's a hype Discord. Drop your hot bombs. Drop your bombs on the Discord, and I will surely respond to them, and we'll trade paragraphs, and it'll be great. So head over to mixedmediapodcast.com. All right. And with that, we'll go into our last segment of the night, which is Ben on Tchaikovsky. All right. And here we go. Oh. That was a false start. I accidentally double-clicked the button. Okay, here we go.
Mixed Media Music.
All right, welcome to Mixed Media Music, the portion of the Mixed Media Podcast devoted to all things related to music. a particular emphasis on classical music and on film and other media, music, film, and other media. My name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and a media composer, and I am the primary host for Mixed Media Music, and I am assisted by my two co-hosts, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
My name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
My name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
All right. So tonight on Mixed Media Music, we're going to be talking about melody and contrast in late Tchaikovsky. So in particular, I'm going to focus on Tchaikovsky's last three symphonies, number 4, 5, and 6. And so I've been thinking about this a little bit this week. Actually, maybe for a couple of weeks, and actually going back to I think our show 2 weeks ago, where I was arguing with Reddit, and Nathan presented someone asking about like what is like your favorite melody or like the most impactful melody and something like that. And I mentioned a couple of things. And I mentioned Tchaikovsky, but also, maybe like a week ago or so, I noted on our Discord, which plug to join our Discord. You can find a link to that at Mixed Media. Oh, it's not visible right now, is it? Mixedmediapodcast.com.
Yes, it is visible. Yep.
Oh, is it? Okay, I can't. It's not visible on my end. Okay, mixedmediapodcast.com. You can find a link to our Discord server and continue talking about art all week. But I had noted on there that there's a particular song that I don't know why this popped into my head, but this is a song that gets used a lot, and like at least it was used a lot when I was younger, and like the church I went to. I think it's called The Harvest of Justice by David Haas, I think. And it's a song I knew before listening to Tchaikovsky, and it's kind of a simple, like, basic church hymn, I guess. But I remember the first time I heard the second movement of Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony, I'm like, isn't this the same melody that is in that song at church? And I don't know why. I was flipping through a hymnal at my church the other day, and I saw this. I went to that tune, and it's credited to. It says tune David Haas. I'm like, this is not. It's literally, Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony, second movement, same key. It's just that we have some octave displacement so that it's, slightly more singable for the average person who isn't like a musical person at all. Not that Tchaikovsky's melody is not singable. And I guess as a result of that, I've just been listening to the late Tchaikovsky symphonies, which are some of my favorite pieces. And I've been thinking about melody in them. So I guess the thing that has stood out to me in the past 2 weeks or so is that we talk a lot in like the classical composition world, at least, about contrast, right? You want, even if you're not in the classical composition world, it's a good idea, to think about contrast in what you're doing, right? You have an A idea and then a second idea, contrasting B idea, and maybe you go back to A or whatever, or some other more complicated version of that form in terms of form. But it's kind of just how people tend to learn composition, right? This principle of contrast. Now, granted, this is not a principle that is inherent to like all kinds of music. There are lots of like non-Western styles of music, or even like non-classical related styles that lots of things that do not adhere to the principle of contrast, and sometimes it's more of a principle of like continuous development. But even so, you can adopt different methods. But the principle of contrast is a really strong one. It probably is somewhat inherent to the just the nature of music, and I think especially in Western music, it's probably historically related as well to the sort of neoclassical idea, Enlightenment era ideal of music imitating rhetoric, ancient Greek rhetoric, right? Point, counterpoint, and refuting the counterpoint, sort of thing. So, if we go by that, right? When we talk about the principle of contrast, again, very useful, especially when you're starting out your composition journey. Well, the question is, what do you have contrast with what you've written first? How should it contrast? And I think a lot of the ways that people tend to think of that is in terms of like contrast in mood, contrast in like tempo, contrast in meter, contrast in instrumentation, things like that. But I find that is not kind of the sort of way that Tchaikovsky constructs his late symphonies, and there's lots of contrast in what he does. So I kind of want to just go through some of the movements from his late symphonies, just kind of in a really cursory way. And I strongly encourage you to listen to all these symphonies. Or actually, really listen to everything Tchaikovsky ever wrote. But but in particular, his fourth, fifth, and sixth symphonies. So yeah, we could dive into any one of these movements. I was thinking about like just talking about the second movement of his fifth symphony, which maybe my favorite melody ever. Now that I think about it, but and I was thinking about that, like, you know what? In order to really do that justice, it would take me a little bit of like we have to figure out some things on a technological end so we could listen to it, and I could kind of like pause and and without like breaking any copyright laws, and it would take some technological effort that I didn't have time to do, and it would probably take like 4 episodes just to go through that movement. So we're just going to kind of go through this in a cursory way, and then I'm going to kind of offer what I sort of see as how Tchaikovsky is setting up melodic contrasts. Okay, so the Fourth Symphony, first movement. Now, it's important to keep in mind for the Fourth and Fifth Symphonies, there's somewhat cyclical, what we call cyclical form, in that there's a particular theme that is that appears in every movement of the Fifth Symphony that doesn't quite play a structural role until the very end. So we're going to kind of bracket that in the Fifth Symphony and leave it out. There's also a theme that occurs at the beginning of the middle point of the first movement of the Fourth Symphony, then comes back at the end of the fourth movement. Again, very important for like understanding the piece as a whole, but it's kind of almost a non-structural element. So more like a narrative element in some ways. So we're going to bracket that and cut that out and forget those kind of non-structural elements, melodic elements. Okay. So ignoring that, in the first movement of the Fourth Symphony, but two things that were really contrasting. We have this sort of 9/8 waltz-like melody. Okay, now it's not exactly a waltz, and we're kind of getting some weird rhythmic displacement. And 9/8 isn't really a waltz anyway, but it's kind of has this waltz feel. And it starts off with this somewhat longer line, but the portions of this line are kind of these fragments from the line eventually kind of become the focus, and we lose the longer line that initially starts off our section. Okay, and again, like in some ways, what's more important are the rhythmic elements, and like the way the rhythm is displaced, and where we're getting these kind of dotted rhythms within our grouping of 3. That's almost more important than the original melodic line that he gives us. Now, again, it's important to note again that this is a really dance-like melody in some ways. It's kind of like it's sort of a broken waltz, we can call it. And that's another important thing to keep in mind about Tchaikovsky is that a lot of these things are going to be very dance-like, but generally they're more broken dances in his symphonies. Okay, and then the contrasting material is we have this longer melodic line. Initially in like the cellos and violas, kind of lower string instruments with a lot of kind of dancing woodwinds on top. And eventually this melody this longer lyrical line, smooth, singable line, right? And in contrast to the longer but not singable really dance melody first. So we have this longer singable line as our second idea, with lots of kind of counterpoint, figuration, decoration stuff, and the woodwinds on top of it. And eventually these two ideas kind of get combined a little bit. But that's a little bit beyond what the purposes of what we're talking about. So that's our contrast in the first movement. In the second movement, we are contrasting a very long, lyrical, and singable melody, at first in the oboe. And then we're going to contrast that ultimately with a still lyrical melody, but something that feels really heavy. Instead of like a song, it kind of feels like, at least to me, in the way that he kind of marks the melody, it almost feels like it's like kind of this repeated effort of like push, 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 right? It's not very singable. It's lyrical, it's pretty, but it's heavy, and it is it's kind of stationary. And this melody, the second melody, it kind of goes from the longer form, and it gets broken up into little fragments, and those fragments are repeated. Okay. The third movement. Now this is. The third movement is often where this, pattern for Tchaikovsky breaks down a little bit. But what I would say is, in general, we kind of have three ideas in the third movement. We have this kind of really short, not melodic pizzicato string idea. We have this kind of rustic, kind of like folk dance in the woodwinds, and then we have this sort of like almost like a combination of like a drinking song and like a march. Okay, so our contrast there is more in terms of genre and instrumentation. So that kind of breaks our pattern. But like I said, it's kind of often what happens in his symphonies. And the fourth movement, our contrast is between this really brilliant idea, right? Lots of really fast, scalar runs, and fanfare and the full orchestra, contrasted with this kind of Russian folk song, very simple Russian folk song. Okay. Fifth Symphony, first movement. Again, bracketing out the cyclical theme that appears in every movement. So we start with a line which is initially, again, we have a triple rhythm, so we have 6/8, kind of like the similar to the first movement of Fourth Symphony. Initially, it's a longer line. It's a longer lyrical line, but it's not a singable line. I mean, literally, all these things are singable, but they're not like they don't feel song-like. Or you're not going to adapt them as a church hymn. That's what I mean by not singable. And again, the kind of fragments that make up this longer line are kind of broken up and then presented as and repeated as sort of main ideas. The contrast there with that is again a really long melody and this lyrical singable melody, which in the strings, and it has a counter melody in the woodwinds, which is also a very singable, lyrical, long line. and for both the counter melody and the melody, they kind of are going to build up. In some ways, we have like a fragment, the fragment repeated, and then on the third time we continue that fragment and build up into a longer melody. Okay. Second movement, the kind of movement that is the genesis of me thinking about this. We begin with this really, really beautiful horn melody. Like I said, maybe my favorite melody ever. And this melody, it kind of has three parts, and it starts off with just almost like three separate melodic ideas, but they're all kind of woven together. And we first just start off with the melody itself, and then we start adding some melody in the horn, and then we start adding other wind instruments that are playing kind of canonic imitation. So like where the horn is kind of holding a note, the four notes the horn just played going to be echoed in another instrument like the clarinet or oboe. So building up through imitation, so ornamenting through imitation of this really long, beautiful, singable melody, which I said is literally a hymn at least in some hymnals out there. And then that's contrasted with another kind of melodic idea, which is, again, it starts off as kind of a somewhat longer melodic line, not very singable, but definitely lyrical, and that is kind of chopped up into fragments, and we just get little fragments thereafter. We don't really, I guess maybe once we return to the longer idea, but it's mostly just fragments. Okay, so those are our contrasting ideas there. And the third movement, again, not quite fitting into the pattern which we're going to establish ultimately, but we have it's the clearest waltz we get in all of these symphonies. A nice lyrical waltz melody contrasted with this really kind of spiky, not very melodic thing. It's kind of just like repeated, sequenced 16th notes. Okay, so that's our contrast. I guess in some ways that's kind of fragmented, contrasted with a longer, danceable waltz. And the final movement, we're going to kind of be contrasting this sort of the cyclical theme, which we've bracketed so far and ignored. It becomes structural in the fourth movement as kind of this really regal march, and that is that's a nice, really long, kind of processional sort of idea, contrasted with a lot of short fragments of that are not melodic at all, never progress to build up to a melody, and also contrasted with the third idea, which is another melody where we have like a fragment, same fragment repeated a little bit differently, and then finally in the third time the fragment goes on to a longer, full lyrical idea. And finally the sixth symphony. The first movement, our first idea, we have a kind of short fragment, literally pulled from the beginning of Beethoven's Pathétique eighth. I think it's the eighth piano sonata. Really short kind of cell. Now Beethoven, someone who really didn't write too many long melodic lines, a lot of really short cells of things that he builds upon. So Tchaikovsky here, first idea, taking this fragment and just kind of repeating it as a fragment. It never progresses into anything really lyrical. And contrasted with a very, very long lyrical section, that again we have kind of like fragment again, and then the fragment which finally achieves this really long line. The second movement is a 5/4 sort of false waltz. I don't know if you could think of it that way. It kind of feels like a waltz, but we're awkwardly missing a beat somewhere. And our contrast here is between like a kind of light 5/4 dance lyrical with another kind of still lyrical thing, but instead of being really light, it's kind of a minor key, darker and heavier. That's probably more of the kind of traditional contrast that we're going to think of as a young composer. A third movement, we're kind of contrasting really fast fragments which never progress to anything with a nice long kind of stately march. And finally, the fourth movement of the Sixth Symphony, we're contrasting this descending line, which Tchaikovsky is good at. I think someone challenged him at one point to write a melody that is only a descending, I think, minor scale or just a descending scale, and he did that as part of the Nutcracker. He said you could turn just a descending scale into a melody. And so he does that again here. We except that it's really interesting orchestrationally. You need to have European orchestra seating because the notes pass from like first violins to the other side of the orchestra, second violins, back and forth, which you don't get if you have the first and seconds sitting next to each other in America. So interesting kind of stereo effect on this descending scale. And the descending scale is kind of the main melodic idea, but yeah, it is kind of broken up further and fragmented. And then is contrasted with this final idea, which is, again, singable, really beautiful lyrical melody. And once again, we have this idea of like start of a melody, same start of it, slightly altered, maybe a little bit higher, and then the third time a little bit higher, and it finally achieves, goes on into this long, beautiful, singable line. Okay, so that's kind of my brief description of these melodic contrasts, thematic contrasts in Tchaikovsky's late symphonies. Now, so to me, what I'm hearing, and I strongly encourage you to listen to these pieces, so you have some sense of what I'm talking about, and you can agree or disagree with me. But what I see from Tchaikovsky, the way he creates contrasts, we have two general sorts of things. We have either things that are fragmented or non-singable. And these things that are non-singable tend to start off as a longer, more lyrical idea, and then they become more fragmented. Things that are always fragmented tend to stay that way. And these things are contrasted then with longer singable lyrical lines. And these longer singable lyrical lines, one of two things can happen to them. One is that we're presented with them in kind of simple form, and then counter melodies are added to them. And sometimes the counter melodies are equally as melodic and lyrical. And so we can either add counter melodies to them to make them richer, or we add like imitation, canonic imitation. Like as I said, we've just played four notes and then landed on a longer note, and then another instrument will echo those same four notes. Although one thing I will note that is that because this is something you're often taught as a young composer, right? Oh, you use something like that when the melodic instrument is holding a note. Tchaikovsky often staggers them so that it's not just like longer note now starting the second, but like echo. He kind of overlaps them just slightly. So we can either get that, like enriching this long lyrical line through counter melodies or echoing, or by adding decoration on top of it, or we get this kind of idea of instead of taking something longer and fragmenting it and staying with the fragments instead of a longer thing, we get the opposite, where we have kind of a tripartite idea, right? We have like a shorter fragment, it doesn't quite achieve liftoff, go a little bit higher to the same idea, and it doesn't quite achieve liftoff again, and we finally have the idea a third time, and it then progresses to a really long line, right? That we were kind of expecting from the first two repetitions of it. So building from fragments to something longer. So to me, that's interesting. I personally find that most of the contrast he's doing is in the kinds of melodies that he's using, and there are other orchestrational things as well. But it's not to me so much of like a mood and like, I've just like changed styles, because sometimes these things aren't like that stylistically different. Like especially if I take like the last movement of the Sixth Symphony, stylistically, there's no real contrast there. We have two kind of really emotional lyrical ideas. The one starts off as kind of a longer idea of a scale and is kind of fragmented, and we never really get anything truly long after that. That's contrasted with this idea that it takes us 3 times to get to a longer thing, but we finally get this longer lyrical thing. It's still in the same kind of stylistic key sort of world, same instrumental orchestrational sort of world. So we haven't left that, but the contrast to me is just in how the melody is constructed. So I think these are ideas that are really worth pondering and playing with. Instead of just trying to make like contrast, as I said, in kind of these really obvious ways, thinking about contrast in like literally how the melody is constructed. And again, that's not like literally speaking about like the shape of the melody or like, up or down, that sort of thing. But literally like how it's built up, right? Is it something longer that is, we never, get back to the longer thing, we only get fragments of it that are repeated? Are we starting the fragments and then turning those into something longer? Do we have something long that is just enriched by adding things to it? Or do we just have fragments which are never really amount to anything? In terms of a longer singable idea. So, yeah, I'm not sure, this is just totally my own reading of this, my own hypothesis. I've never heard anybody kind of think about it in this way. But it's interesting to me, at least, to think about creating contrast that way. So, I encourage you to listen to these pieces and let me know what you think, whether you think that that's sort of a contrast that he's setting up, and whether you think that that's kind of an effective thing that is worth considering for your own composition. I'd be really curious to hear, because Tchaikovsky is kind of an endless mine of fantastic melodic ideas. There's so much more that, like I said, I could probably take any of these movements and talk about them for a month and try and get into what's really happening in them. There's an endless mine of things to pull from these symphonies, some of the greatest works ever made, I think. But on just kind of a structural level and thinking about the overall contrast within each movement, that's really what I see them as. A lot of times I don't think the contrast is in terms of mood, and it's almost never in terms of like tempo or meter. So it's not in all the obvious ways. A lot of times it's in these sort of the literal like ways that he's constructing melodies and tearing them apart or building them up. Yeah.
Cool. Tchaikovsky the goat.
He's one of them, I would say.
For sure.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too that a lot of people, I think I got into this kind of debate once a while, like maybe a year ago or so, on Reddit, about, maybe I even pulled it in arguing with Reddit at one point. I can't remember, about whether Tchaikovsky is good at writing counterpoint. Because a lot of people say, oh, he couldn't write counterpoint, and he himself probably would say that he was really bad at counterpoint. But I would say that, yes, he's probably not the guy you want to write a fugue, right? But in the way that it counts, in terms of like writing nice, canonic imitation, right, the echoing sort of thing we talked about, or just kind of adding really nice counter melodies, it's what he does is quite effective. Counterpoint. It may not be like the most brilliant, like, wow, what an active genius, like, Bach, right? In some ways it's very natural for Bach, but it also seems like it's like active genius, sort of some of the stuff that he comes up with in his counterpoint. You probably wouldn't call his counterpoint like genius, but is it the right kind of counterpoint to be really effective? I would say absolutely.
Cool. Well, I hope the Redditors don't feel too bad for losing the argument.
I'm actually curious. I have to go back and check our, old catalog and see whether I pull that in for an argument with Reddit or not. I don't remember anymore. It's been so long.
Oh, we've got someone on the live whiteboard. Who is it? It's not one of us, right?
Not me.
This is great. No. Really effective. Yes, this is what we've wanted this whole time. It's actually really neat, too. I wonder if this person's using the mouse.
It has to be a drawing tablet, right? This is a really nice... This for a mouse is very good.
Yeah.
Oh, really effective is greater than genius.
Yes, we agree.
In quotation marks. Yeah. Well, you too can join and join us on Locals and have access to our whiteboard, which, again, I don't know that anybody has ever taken advantage of until now.
Very few occasions, yes.
Yeah, right. Very few occasions. You can. I'm not sure who's writing this.
It's Kai. He said he's using a mouse, which is crazy.
Oh,
but.
Okay. Well, you can be like Kai and have access to this whiteboard and write anything within reason.
Yes.
By joining us and supporting us on Locals, which the link for that also down there, mixedmediapodcast.com.
Amen. All right. Want to pull us out of the podcast?
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us tonight, whether you're watching live or watching or listening to us after we release this in post. It's always a pleasure to have you in our audience. Make sure you give us a like and subscribe, or whatever the equivalent of that is. Check us out on our Discord. You can also check out our Locals page where you can support us. Thank you to our supporters, K. Kairos, 99 Crime, Post, Rob Sharma, and I'm forgetting someone. Alex Egbert. There we go. Our supporters on Locals. And thanks for joining us for another great show. Special thank you to 99 Crime and K. Kairos for joining us for a really interesting interview about game development and it's Metroid. Metroidvania. Yeah. I don't know why. I always want to I've never, I see this in our Discord all the time, but I've never heard it pronounced. So, okay, there we go. Yeah.
Sweet. All right, see you guys next week.
All right, see you guys.
Oh my gosh. Oh, there we go.
Look, tell a man no trouble. I don't want beef, man. I just want vibes. Big man like me, no need for the telephone hype. I got too much getting online. One rule, then dead I'm on site. Wrong move, I bet they gon' ride. No need for the telephone hype, nah. No need for the snoozing. Big whip outside, I'm cruising. Big stick inside, no losing. Better watch out for the snake and Judas is. Don't ask them who this is. I bet they know what I'm moving in. I bet I show it into a dim. How you hate and then lose again? How you hating my vibes? Why you wasting my time? Getting hype on my line. Tell a man I don't want feedback, I just want relax. Brand new whip, two-tone, I need that brand new hit. You know, like lean back, brand new bits I live in. We back, man, you never gon' like us. Get them on sight now, let them all like that way. They know I'm more righteous. Look at my life, I'm living alright. I'm nice, you know I'm alright. Cause looking like Christ, no need for the hype or fight or telephone vibe.